I'd like to welcome all of you to our March 11th, 2021 council meeting. In the interest of time efficiency and ensuring that everyone who wishes to address the council is given the opportunity to do so, the following will apply to all comments made by the public. If you desire to be recognized by the chair, please fill out a request form and present it to the city clerk present here in council chambers. Each speaker shall be allotted 3 minutes to address the council unless such time is extended by the mayor or by questions from council. Groups shall designate a spokesperson to avoid repetition of comments. Every effort will be made to avoid interrupting speakers. Thank you for participating in your city government. We ask that you please silence all electronic devices at this time. With that, I'll call this council meeting to order. Our invocation tonight will be shared by Pastor Hugh Lackey, who is the pastor of St. Cloud Presbyterian Church, after which, if you'll remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Could we please stand together and welcome, Pastor. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Will you all pray with me, please? Abba, Father, as this council meeting begins, we ask that you will bless the council members for their devotion and their discernment of the actions that will be taken, the people who have come to be heard. We pray for the faithful employees of this community and especially for the men and women in blue who protect us daily from harm. On this day, the anniversary of the announcement of COVID-19, we ask your blessings on the families of the 530,000 victims of this virus, and your divine healing for those who are suffering this day from the virus or its after effects. Lord, we ask that you will indeed watch over our great country, protect us, protect the military who watches over us. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you, Pastor. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Blackwell,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Here.
Councilmember Matheny,
Here.
Councilmember Cooper,
Here.
Councilmember Askew.
Here.
At this time, I believe, have a presentation from Marjorie Craig, our Environmental Utilities Director, concerning our water and wastewater.
The long walk to the podium. Marjorie Craig, Environmental Utilities Director. As y'all know, there were 2 water main breaks this past week. One was caused by a contractor for the school board, and that occurred on Thursday, late in the afternoon. And we became aware of it and sent out a reverse 911 call. We found that the coverage was not to our liking, to the number of calls, and we hand-delivered notices, which we have not had to do in the past. The number of accounts that were affected were about 1,900, which is a lot. And on Saturday, when we received the samples back and they were clear, we hand-delivered the rescission notices, went door to door, and also did the reverse 911. So on Friday night, about 10 p.m., there was a break in Pine Lake Estates on Pine Lake Drive, and that is a piece of pipe from that break. It was put in about in the 70s. It's SDR 26. It's not the same pipe standard that we use today. I've become aware that we've had a number of breaks in that area, and we're developing a CIP project to replace that pipe, and we'll look at number of repair sleeves and number of breaks, and then the criticality of operations to prioritize which parts of the pipe would be replaced in which order. So it'll become a part of our program. We also, I have not given an update on the water color issue in several weeks, but just to touch base with you, we still get 1 or 2 calls about water color a week, and that's very normal actually in a water utility system for different reasons, flushing, and we have been very aggressively flushing mains throughout the service area. So as far as the wastewater system, we have tightened up the system quite a bit through the inflow dishes, the sealing of the manholes, and the caps, which we did on both on the customer side and on our side. And we've got the report back that we'll put together with a priority list for CIP projects for rehabbing lift stations and manholes, or it'll be manholes. We also bid out a manhole rehab contract to have an as-needed contract for lift station rehab, and we plan on selecting about 3 contractors to do that, so that it's not just one contractor. So with that, do you have any questions?
Are there any questions from council?
Yes, ma'am. Do you know about the infiltration of the sand on the west in the grid?
We did have a customer call. It was on Columbia, and we went out, Tony went out and checked the meter. There was sand in the meter. He did a spot check of other meters in the neighborhood, and I did not get a call back that there were any others, and they're really good about calling me, but I'll double check. And we believe it came from possibly an internal break somewhere in the system, but we're not sure. We're not finding it in our system. So if that changes, then we'll let you know. That's very unusual.
They told me it was on the hot side of the water that it was coming in. So I don't know how they could do that, but they flushed it twice, what they told me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they flushed it.
And that's why I called you.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to know that stuff. So again, you have some anomaly, something happening, absolutely we want to know. So we're not seeing it in the other parts of the neighborhood right now, so.
You're staying back in touch with that gentleman?
My customer service folks are,
Okay.
and the field staff are as well. I don't have the number, or the contact. I can get the contact number and call them also, see if they have any insight.
Just want to make sure it's taken care of so they don't keep having, sand in the water.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to call
Nobody
them.
does.
I've talked to a number of customers this week and over the weekend as well. It's my pleasure.
Will you find out how it came in or why it came in?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
You think it just came through the filtration of the pipes outside or inside? You don't know?
In my long experience, it's normally the customer side, but I, never say never. But if it is our side, we will get to the bottom of it.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, as always. And I wanted to give kudos to the city employees because that break on Pine Lake Drive, it was wrapped up really quick, very quickly. So I know they must have worked long hours and overnight
Right.
and to get that open. At our last council meeting, we had a resident come up that was having concerns about her water quality. Were we able to go to her house and meet with her and, provide water quality tests and things like that to make
So
her?
I've reached out to Ms. Lowen and emailed her and called her and have texted her and have not been able to schedule a time with her yet. Now, I did call her today and say that our email was out. So if she did happen to email me since Tuesday, I likely didn't get it, but I routinely have been doing searches for her name and email address and touching base with her throughout, since our last meeting. I
Okay.
reached out to her right away.
Okay, thank you for doing that. If you could keep trying to get in contact with her, that would
Absolutely.
That
I
would be
mean,
great.
and I even told her, I said, I don't want time to slip away and for it to get off the radar screen.
Yeah.
Because I really, I'm very willing, as you know, I'll put in whatever it takes, the hours that it takes to go. I'm happy to go out and see her.
And my last question for you was your update on the sanitary system. Did we ever find the smoking gun in the system of where all the inflow was coming from?
Nope. No, and I went out on the midnight runs both nights just to see what that was all about, looking in the manholes and you could see flow. We did find some inflow, don't get me wrong, but I don't think, we didn't find one source of 1 million gallons a day or 800,000 gallons a day. So, but I've also tasked them with coming up with what their estimate is of how much it's been tightened up, and the Q or the flow gallons per day. How much did we really tighten it up? And that'll be particularly important because DEP will be giving us a consent order based on the sanitary sewer overflows. And that's something they're doing statewide. We are not the only utilities. In fact, our first phone call with them, they said, you know, you guys have done a great job. Just this last, since I guess just before I got here, it's caused us to have the consent order. So unfortunately, the DEP and the Tallahassee and local staff are held to very strict standards, and that has to do with the Mosaic event that occurred in, St. Pete, City of St. Pete, and Fort Lauderdale, who had massive overflows in Sarasota County, had massive sanitary sewer overflows.
So in the report you had mentioned you were going to get, do you think that they'll be estimating how much they tightened up, or is the consultant going to be doing that? Okay. That was great. If you could just share that when it comes in.
Absolutely, and not that I won't probably be checking the numbers, but you guys probably will too. We're cut out of the same mold. Thank you.
Thank you.
How much?
Thank you, Ms. Craig, for your update, and thank you for
last
your
question.
leadership and your hard work.
It's my team. They're awesome.
Wait 1 minute.
Yeah, one minute. How much longer before you think that the grid, the state streets will be completely, as far as checked all of the water and sewer
Are you talking about for the
effluents on both of them?
the inflow?
Yes.
So you might recall that we narrowed down where we saw the massive inflow coming in to Lift Station 5, which is located at the Lakeshore area where
Yep.
the old wastewater plant was.
Yep.
And so we narrowed it down to sub-basins. So those were the target areas that USSI came through and did the manhole lining and all that. And we've completed that particular study. And so what's come out of that study is, you know, they've tightened things up, but they've come up with they will come up with a prioritized list of manholes that need to have rehab work done. So we've just done the lift station contract. We haven't done it yet. It'll come before you guys for selection. But we did, you know, put out the RFP. So what we're working on now is a manhole rehab contractor list. And as we've discussed here before, it'll be more than one contractor that we'll have to perform those manhole rehabs.
I just noticed in the last week down at the lakefront there was a bad odor for a day or two. Do you know why, or that was
I
where
don't know, but when you do smell it like that, let us know, because then I go down.
that was from the original where the sewage treatment plant used
And
to be.
sometimes odor control needs to be adjusted, but
Was the smell over by Krabby Bill's in that area that you came across?
No, it was
It
back
was
here.
on the west end?
Yes,
Okay.
it was where the
closer to the
sewage
lift
treatment used to
station.
be.
Yeah, where the treatment plant.
So evidently you're not getting enough
We have an odor
deodorized
control
stuff in there.
system. We have an odor control system. But, you know, there are also other reasons that sometimes there's odor in that area. But if you let us know right away, then we can go out and make sure it's us. And then we can adjust it or fix it. And so when I said that about the manhole rehab, I want to, and I don't want to take very long and I don't want to glaze you all over with all engineerical stuff, but there's a lot of different types of manhole rehab types, like how far do you go, what material do you use, Is some of it overkill, is it not? So I've got one of our engineers looking at what's the best material, what's the best way to do that, and compare with our sister cities. So the plan is to have more than one manhole rehab company doing it, but if we do determine that one method is better for some types and for another, we might make that recommendation. So the only reason I'm telling you that is I don't want you to, if I come back with one, you know, hey, you said there was going to be 3. The only reason we come back with one would be that we determined that that was the best thing for the citizens, for the manholes.
So what kind of time frame are you looking in the state streets?
We've not stopped anything, so we're continuing with our process. I can't wave a magic wand. I mean,
I guess what I'm asking is when do you think you'll be completed in the state streets so they can start doing some paving that we're seeing up there at Sawgrass that's only been, you know, Sawgrass has only been 10, 12 years old. We've got stuff in the state streets here that's been 50 years and it's never got put any new asphalt in the last 40, 50 years. So I'm looking to find out when are you going to get done with that so we can get started getting some asphalt paving in the grid streets.
Mayor,
I don't think that's her department. Yes, sir.
may I be recognized?
Yes, you may.
Yes. Mr. Cooper, last year we did a pavement condition index
I
for
know
the
we
entire
did.
city.
Yes.
And the second thing we're doing is a master plan, a stormwater master plan for the historic grid. That should be coming to the council, I believe, next meeting for approval for that RFP. And then once we have that completed, we'll be able to map out how we're going to do our stormwater system and replace that in conjunction with environmental utilities. And then if those streets in the historic grid meet the threshold of 70% or below for the pavement condition index, we'll be paving those in a priority list.
right, and so if we determine there needs to be a pipe replaced in those roads, we're going to do that before
Yes.
they do the pavement. So the plan for tightening up would be mostly pipelining, manhole rehab, and lift station rehabs. And so unless there's a failure of the pipe, we don't plan on replacing the pipe, but we'll line the pipe and the sewer laterals as well.
Okay.
But it's always important, we can't guarantee that if you pave something, that one of my pipes is going to break. We just try
Next
really
week
hard
after
that
you
we
just
fix
put
it before.
new asphalt, I understand. All right, thank you, man.
Thank you,
Mayor-
Ms. Gregg.
Mayor, can I ask you a
Yes, you may.
question? Or ask the city manager, really. So I had brought up a few meetings ago about, like, why doesn't the city look at the historic grid and start biting it off, start eating the elephant and take it bite at a time and
Yeah.
start these 3 streets and do them like soup to nuts and put, sidewalks, culverts, fix the utilities, pave. And I thought we had at least, 3 with that direction. So before we pave, I would hope we would be evaluating the road section.
Well, that's what I was, we've already done the pavement condition index, so we did that 18 months ago, so we have that list. And then we're doing the stormwater master plan, grid, I guess, to look at those pipes, and now we're doing the utility side, to make sure all that's tightened up before we go in and do any paving. And then, as far as master planning, sidewalks and pocket parks and things like that, that's part of the Envision St. Cloud plan.
Well, I guess I was thinking we would figure out the road section before we go and pave, because if you go
Sure.
street by street by street, you've got, every street is different. Like, I thought we would maybe figure out, here's our typical section, and then start bringing the streets onto the system and match all that. I would hate to pave it and then go back and look at maybe we're saying the same thing, but I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
want to make sure we
We are.
look at the ultimate section for each street.
And it needs to be well coordinated
pave.
with utilities, sidewalks. We don't want to pave and put in a sidewalk and then 2 months later tear it up to put stormwater pipe in. So yes, ma'am, we're all coordinating all that together.
But you've got plenty of money sitting that's to go ahead and getting this asphalt done, so let's see what we can do about getting these pipes and let's
Well,
move.
we have to.
It's been 18 months, let's start
Well,
moving.
we have to do, again, some of those streets don't meet the pavement condition index. They're above the threshold. But again, we know some of them don't, but we need to do the stormwater master plan and look at the utilities and all that stuff, tighten all that before we go start paving.
That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Start moving.
This brings us to our citizens forum. Any person who desires to comment on any item not in this agenda is provided this opportunity to address the city council. Each person is requested to complete a sign-in form to be provided to the presiding officer prior to or as soon as is practical thereafter the person addresses the council. You will please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone here who has requested to speak during the citizens forum?
No, sir.
This is not the citizens forum. When we get to item 4, you'll certainly be given the opportunity to speak. That brings us to our consent agenda. The next portion of tonight's meeting is the consent agenda, which contains items that have been determined to be routine and non-controversial. If anyone in the audience wishes to address a particular item on the consent agenda, you will be given the opportunity to do so. Additionally, if staff or members of the city council wish to speak on a consent item, they will also be given the same opportunity. First of all, are there any items on the consent agenda that the council is wanting to speak to?
I'd like to pull D as in dog for discussion.
D for dog? You said D?
D, yes.
Did you say D?
Dog. D as in dog.
Thank you. All right, if there's no others, we'll pull item D, and you may speak to that.
Thank you. I want to thank the city staff for pulling this from our last meeting and cleaning up some of the language in the agreement. It was missing some words in there, so it made it very confusing. But I did have a pretty extensive phone call with DEP as well as the city staff, and explained a lot of the parts and pieces to me, so I'm happy with where we're at. The one thing I wanted to mention is when we had the workshop and we discussed this issue, we did discuss scanning the building, using some technology to scan, photograph, document the building so that if, we wanted to rebuild a facade, or we would be able to. This agreement doesn't say anything about it, and it didn't say anything in the backup, and the city manager says, oh yeah, we remember, but I just wanted to put it on the record that we are going to document the building before it goes down. So that was all my comments are.
Oh, we certainly are in agreement with that. Mr. Sturgeon?
Yes, and thank you for bringing it up, Councilmember Matheny. I think Mr. Askew had something to speak about also.
Same
All
thing.
right.
All right.
Mr. Askew?
But, go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Matheny. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we're in a place that I think we all know where that building's probably going to end up going, and I really want to make a motion to save at least an engine, scan the building, make sure if the building does come down, that within a year, the engine would go out so our citizens can see it out in the public. It's a big, beautiful piece of equipment. I hate to see it thrown in the trash. So I don't know how you do that, and I guess I'm looking to the city attorney. How do you do that where it's we know that that's exactly the direction that we wanted to go, and we can kind of put it in place right now? Make a motion to make a motion?
Well, or you can, I think you get pretty explicit direction to the city manager. This has been part of the discussions from the beginning. My understanding, obviously, on the engine piece is there's going to have to be a coordination of a partial demolition of the building before the engine can be taken. So that's going to require some coordination with the contractors and the city and OUC and everybody. So
I would be more comfortable if we can lock that in to into a motion of some sort. So in case that we all leave, or in case that this gets dragged out for 5 years, that at least they could see what the intent was. So a couple of those things would fall into place. And is there a way to do that?
sure, you can just if you feel more comfortable about it, there's other than to provide a motion that you would direct the city manager to ensure that the engine is preserved for future use and the front of the building is scanned for posterity. I think that's what it is. There's no action to take because We have
Right.
no contract as to what we're going to do with the engine. We don't know what it's going to cost. The additional cost is going to be, all that might have to come back to the city council at some point, because I don't think the preservation of the engine was part of the construction, the cost of fixing the problem out there.
Right.
And just from a timing perspective, it can't be that long, because this has been dragging on so long. This thing has got to get taken care of very, very quickly, so.
Right.
you know.
Well, to that point too, is I was sad when I saw the schedule. I don't know if you looked at the number of years that this thing is proposed to take. It's 7 or 8 years. So I did ask staff if, I understand when you're filling out certain paperwork, you give yourself plenty of time so that you don't have to go ask for extensions. But I was like, please do everything you can to expedite this project, so it doesn't take 8 years. But to your point, 8 years, none of us will be here.
Right.
So,
Well, and I guess my point was that the structure piece is, as I understand it, is part of the early work after the design is completed. The full remediation of the site might take 7, 8 years, but that piece is going to be done fairly soon in the process. But just, Mr. Askew, if you just want to make a motion on those 2 points, that's fine. I guess my point is what you're doing is basically giving formal direction to the city manager, saying this is how this is going to be handled.
Okay, I would like to make them, do we want to vote on this first or wait?
do you wrap it in the approval?
You can
Yeah.
put it in as part of the approval.
Okay.
Dave, which engine are you looking for? There's 4 or 5 engines in there.
It's the nice one.
Yeah, the nice one that's right by the window.
I
it
know which
seems
one
like.
it is.
Yeah.
I'll make sure it gets.
I've been
there.
in there. It's just, and I'm sure the citizens out here are going, what in the world are you talking about? If you drive by the building, it is a mammoth-size engine, and I could just see kids growing up and schools checking it out, and there's a good history that comes along with it. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of a cost to it, but that thing will last forever. It's just a giant piece of steel,
So how do we need to word that?
Well, if you're going to move to approve this item, you can include it, I think Councilwoman Matheny suggested it's a great idea, just include it as part of the approval.
Okay.
So we need to approve this separately. Can we do that now then?
Yeah, you can do it right now.
All right, and it'll include scanning the building and preserving one of the engines for future historical purposes.
A historical marker?
Does that work?
Yeah. Can we add a historical marker? I'm sure Main Street will take care of that for us.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I already wrote it down. I was ahead of you.
Okay. And it has nothing to do with the trust of our city manager. Just things change up here, it's just amazing. My time here, we've been through a couple, so I want to make sure it's clear direction for everybody moving forward.
So can I ask for a motion for the adoption of resolution number 2021-045R, including a scan of the building and preserving the engine as we had talked about?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Askew, a second from Councilmember Matheny. Would anyone from the audience like to speak to this item before we vote on this? If not, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Would anyone else in the audience like to speak to any other item on the consent agenda? If not, could I entertain a motion for the adoption of the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Askew, a second from Councilmember Matheny for the adoption of the consent agenda minus item D. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
That brings us to item number 8, public hearings. Madam Clerk, will you please read item number 1?
Final public hearing for ordinance number 2021-09. An ordinance of the City of St. Cloud amending the City of St. Cloud Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement System, amending Section 1 definitions, providing for codification, providing for severability provisions, repealing all ordinances in conflict here with, and providing an effective date.
Good evening, Council. Mimi Chair and HR Director. This is the second and final hearing to amend the current ordinance for the firefighters and police officers' pension. Police officers with service earned after July 1st of 2011 and firefighter members with service after April 25th of 2013 should not include more than 300 hours of overtime per calendar year as their compensable salary earned towards the pension. There was an overtime calculation in the system that was identified. The proposal is to change the effective date to amend it to October 1st of 2019.
Thank you. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, we'll have discussion and a motion by council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Matheny for approval. We have a second from Councilmember Askew. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Cooper.
Aye.
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace.
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny.
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Madam Clerk, if you will read items 2, 7, and 3 in that order, that is how we'll consider those items.
First public hearing and introduction for ordinance 2021-01, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a future land use designation of commercial to approximately 31.26 acres identified as Larson at Narcoossee, located east of South Narcoossee Road and north of Lillian Lee Road, providing for amending of the official future land use map of the comprehensive plan, filing of the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication of applicability and effect, severability copies on file and effective date. Public hearing for resolution number 2021-023R, a resolution of the City Council of City of St. Cloud, Florida, making a determination of parking spaces required for specific uses in the proposed commercial PUD identified as Larson at Narcoussee, located east of South Narcoossee Road and north of Lillian Lee Road, St. Cloud, Florida, further described in the body of this resolution. First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2021-02, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a zoning district of PUD, Plan Unit Development, compatible with a commercial future land use designation change adopted by ordinance number 2021-01 for approximately 31.26 acres identified at Larson at Narcoussee, located east of South Narcoussee Road, north of Lillian Lee Road, providing for entering the designation of the official zoning map, providing for the approval of the preliminary master plan, filing the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, severability, and effective date.
Good evening, Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is DRC case CPA 20-0007 related to the future land use map amendment for Larson at Narcoossee. It is a large-scale item and would need to be transmitted to the state for further review. Just by way of background, the existing future land use is low-density residential. The proposed future land use request is for commercial. It is compatible with the surrounding area, and there are no adverse impacts at this time. It's consistent with the strategic plan goal for growth management, and DRC and staff at our meeting on November 23rd, 2020, recommended approval of Ordinance 2020-01. The Planning Commission at their meeting on February 16th recommended approval of Ordinance number 2020-01 for commercial, and the City Council requested action is that you approve Ordinance 2020-01 based on the 16 findings of the Land Development Code and recommend transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for further interagency review. The next item related to this is Larson at Narcoossee parking determination. This is a requirement because the applicant has requested a reduced parking requirement for the subsequent PUD, PMP, preliminary master plan zoning. And by way of background, the parking requirements in our land development code table 3-8 requires that townhomes have 4.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, basically 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and 1 per every 2 units for on-street parking for temporary and visitor parking. And for multifamily, the requirement is for 2 spaces per dwelling unit plus 1 additional space for every 10 units. The applicant's request for townhomes is for 3.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, 1 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and 1/2 space per unit for on-street parking. The multifamily requirement that they're requesting is for 1.8 parking spaces per dwelling unit. They have included a parking demand analysis as part of their application. This request would be consistent with our economic development to promote economic development and our growth management for a vibrant, progressive, and diverse community. DRC and staff at our meeting on December 10th, 2020, recommends approval of Resolution 2021-023R with conditions that the minimum parking be 2 parking spaces per multifamily unit plus 1 per 10 units for visitor parking. And we would support the minimum parking of 3.5 parking spaces for each single-family residential attached unit, essentially the townhome units. And the allocation will be 1 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and 1/2 space on-street parking. The Planning Commission at their meeting recommends approval with conditions for a minimum of 2 parking spaces per multifamily unit and 1 additional 10 units for visitors, and the minimum of 3.5 parking spaces. Staff recommends council action to approve the resolution 2023 with the conditions as stated. Minimum of 2 parking spaces for the multifamily unit with the 1 additional space per 10 units, and the minimum of 3.5 parking spaces per single-family attached unit. Moving on to the PUD, Plan Unit Development Preliminary Master Plan, the applicant is requesting a PUD zoning for the property. Next slide, please. And the existing zoning is agriculture. The proposed zoning is PUD, Plan Unit Development, and it is compatible with the surrounding area, and there are no adverse impacts. By way of a little more further background, the applicant previously had submitted a mixed-use project. However, there was a challenge to meet the standards because there are very specific requirements for place types and for ratios, and so it was recommended that they come in as a commercial planned unit development, which would allow them the ability to be able to have a mix of uses, being the multifamily, the townhomes, and the commercial uses. Next slide, please. This shows the general layout of the uses. The portion on the bottom of your screen would be Narcoossee Road, and to the left is north, and you see the high-density residential which accounts for a largest portion of the site. Then to the rear is the medium-density residential, and there's commercial on the front along Narcoossee Road. The development requirements is for townhomes 104 units, and for multifamily 320 units, and retail commercial 24,720. Next slide, please. This essentially shows some elevations that were received from the applicant to give us an indication of the type of product that will be developed on this site. Those are the townhomes. Next slide, you'll see the multifamily, and the final slide, you see the retail commercial elevations. Next slide. This plan will be consistent with economic development and also for growth management. And DRC and staff at our meeting on November 23rd recommends approval of the request with conditions to increase from 1.8 to 2.0 parking spaces per multifamily unit, and a minimum of 3.5 parking spaces per single-family residential unit. And the Planning Commission also recommended approval of 2 parking spaces per multifamily residential unit with 3.5 parking spaces. The City Council requested action is for approval of Ordinance 2021-02 with conditions, provided that you approve the parking determination previously. This would be consistent with that approval. I think that's it. Yes.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, the applicant is here.
Would the applicant like to speak? Please step forward and what's your name and identity.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Wilson, 215 North Eola Drive with Lowndes Law Firm. I appreciate staff in working with us on this project. As they stated, it's a mixed-use project that we're requesting transmittal of the comp plan amendment to the DEO, and the first reading of the PUD ordinance. The intent is to build a pedestrian-friendly environment where people can, from this community and other communities, can walk to some of the commercial and retail that we would be providing. I'm going to grab or site plan. We'll do this with COVID. We've all moved to Zoom, and I feel like we've become so much better on our electronics. But there's, I think, a little snafu with you all receiving emails over the last couple of days. So I'm not sure that our presentation is available. So I have the old board that we used to carry around, and I don't know if you can see it. But this is just an example of the concept plan that we're doing. One of the changes that your staff requested since we created this concept plan was also right-of-way connection to the south. So our plan, in order to help begin building out, as you all were talking about, a grid network like you have downtown, is that we're required to give access to the south, the north, and to the east. The property in the east is currently in the county, but if that comes into the city or continues to develop in the county, we are anticipating a grid pad for that area. We agree with the staff's recommendation and the Planning and Zoning Board's recommendation with one exception, and that is with respect to the minimum parking for the multifamily units. We provided a parking study which shows that the Institute of Transportation Engineers and the Urban Land Institute both recommend a 1.66 or a 1.65 per unit. We moved that up a little bit to the 1.8 per unit. Of course, we want to make sure that we have adequate parking for the people that we're going to charge rent to. I mean, they're not going to want to come rent a place if they're not going to be able to park there. And of course, there's no parking on Narcoossee Road, right? They're going to have to be able to park. And so we're very comfortable with the 1.8. That's similar to some of the other jurisdictions in Central Florida, and that is our request. One of the things that allows us to do is, instead of building 641 parking spaces, we can build 576. And that helps us pick up it helps us pick up some acreage of open space. And you can, I don't want to get too far from the microphone, but you can see on the site plan, here is a logical place that we would add more parking, but we're trying to preserve that for open space. There's a tree there. We have some nice open space and amenity area in the centers here. And then also we were trying to keep the entrance into the project to have some open space so that you feel like when our residents are coming home that you're sort of passing through this open space and these nice trees. So if the question is, can we fit the 2 spaces per multifamily unit, we can, but our preference would be to keep more of the open space. Again, the project is a little over 31 acres. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. I think half the audience may be our development team, so we have representatives from the developer here, our transportation engineer, and our civil engineer. So happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Before we do that, I'd like to ask, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to any of these items at this time? Yes, ma'am. If you please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Lisa Klepper. I live at 908 Michigan Avenue. I also have property at 1752 up the road. As somebody who has property where there's a builder building homes, I don't think it's a good idea to reduce the parking. The streets become congested. It's very difficult. I know where they're building near me. I worry sometimes. I have a 100-year-old grandmother who lives there, and I worry sometimes what would happen if I needed to get an ambulance or a fire truck down the street. So I just kind of want to put it out there that I don't approve I don't think that's a good idea to reduce the parking and require people to kind of congest the street and make it difficult for emergency vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, would the council have any questions that you'd like to ask? Councilmember Matheny.
I do, for Andre, please.
I knew you were going to ask it anyway.
Mr. Anderson, do you have, I'm sorry, my computer is not charged up. Do you have the future land use maps that are in our agenda package? It wasn't on the presentation. Do you have the future land use?
Yes, I do.
She can put it on the screen. I just want to check something before I make a comment. But for the record, I did have a phone call with the design team this week. They had requested a call, so just for the record. So, Andre, just to make sure I'm not misreading the colors.
Mhm.
So currently, their future land use is low-density residential.
Yes.
Currently, the area all surrounding it is what?
To the east.
That's like another peachy
To the
color.
east is low-density residential.
And then Turtle Creek.
Is low-density residential.
So you said it's compatible with the surrounding area. To me, it's not. Compatible with the surrounding area is the current future land use. And I did bring this up when I had my agenda review, was I found that and I'm sure it's just semantics of planners and whatever, but to me when I read it, I felt like it was very misleading to call it commercial.
Right.
To say this is a future designation of commercial, because it's 424 residential units and it's 24,000 square feet of commercial. And so I asked in my agenda review, how big is a Publix? Just, so I could relate. And they said 50,000 square feet. So this is half of a Publix. So to me, the applications all come across as commercial. And I know that's probably a planning, whatever it is, but to me, I find that misleading when you read it, because you'd say, oh, commercial, great. But then you're like, wait, this isn't commercial. So those are kind of my comments for this application. It's 424 residential units, 24,000 square feet of commercial. I think that the existing future land use designation, to me, is what's compatible with the area, not the requested designation. And also, we know Narcoossee is, the traffic is getting more and more where you can't really travel down the road anymore. So to me, like, to add this additional density to it is not something that I'm going to support.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mark Cooper?
It kind of appears to me in Lillian Lee Road, if you go back there, there was a subdivision back there, and they put some plastic fencing up there. And I looked at it, and I've had some calls and complaints, and it doesn't look very good. They've got Turtle Creek that's got the berm that looks nice. You look in front, what they're going to do here, I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to that. Could you give me a little more explanation exactly what they're going to put across right there on 15?
If I may, I'd ask the applicant to respond to that question.
Sure. I won't put it on you then.
Commissioner, originally we were looking at the design standards of your future land use mixed use, as Andre mentioned. And as we've moved away from that, we are happy to add a similar berm in front of our area that is the northern part where there are the apartments. We just wouldn't want to put a berm in the portion that's in front of the portion that's commercial, that exactly matches what's happening across the street at Turtle Creek. But for the majority of it, we'd be happy to.
Well, I kind of asked, I think, at my time with the city manager, and I think I asked him about if they could put a berm or something, and basically there wasn't enough room to put a berm there. Would you put a berm that would look somewhere similar to what Turtle
Yes.
Creek's got?
Yes, we've got 32 acres. We can work a berm in there if that's what we need to do to address Councilwoman Matheny's comments with regard to compatibility. And as you see on the map, you do move into, to your point, it is not an all-commercial development. That just happens to be the future land use that we get to pick from, kind of the menu that you have at the City of St. Cloud that fits our project, because your commercial does allow some amount of, it allows up to 25 units of residential in the commercial. And so that's why we chose commercial. You can see there's some commercial further to the south. But in essence, much of this is the medium density or a high density residential with the commercial node in it. And the intent with the commercial is to provide some type of services that are needed in this area so that you don't have to drive, we don't have just huge nodes of single family where you have to drive further for kind of an everyday sort of service.
Okay, coming down, I guess that'll come down Lillian Lee along to it, coming down there.
Could you move that to the other side so you can stay close to the microphone? Because we have people listening. Thank you.
There we go. I think you can still kind of see
Okay.
that. So we would be able to match the berm from here to here. This is just the area that's that's commercial.
Okay, and you're still not going to have the 4 parking requirement. You're not going to be able to match the 4 parking per home.
On the single family, no. I mean, your staff in planning and zoning agreed with us that the more appropriate number is to move that one down to the 3.5 per townhome. Because
Okay.
your code doesn't have a townhome rate. It only has a single family rate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I
Councilman
can
Rescue?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple things here. I caught the same thing that Ms. Matheny caught. I noticed it was low-density residential if you compared it over to Turtle Creek across the way. And looking at some of your buildings, I would assume you're probably hitting a good height on some of those buildings there. Was that 3 stories of some of those apartment complexes?
Yes, we're requesting 4 stories on the apartments and 2 stories on the townhomes, which is, again, why, we agree that putting the berm there along Narcoossee to continue to create some separation for those buildings.
Okay, yeah, berm's not going to block 4 stories, but I understand what's going. The other part is parking. I'm not ready to negotiate parking. Just throwing it out there, and it's just I was a little thrown off with the commercial thing as well. In my agenda, I asked the amount of commercial is there, and then right next to it's high density residential. It's just really hard for me to support that, especially so close to Turtle Creek. So.
All right. Trace.
I was trying to keep my comments separate for the separate applications, but we've all kind of lumped it all together, so
Right.
I'll go with that. So on the land use matter, I also was confused by, I understand, in a lot of codes that are mixed use, you get these narrow bands of percentages of uses that, get restrictive, especially on something this small. If it was 500 acres, it's a lot easier to hit a lot of those percentages. So I get it, as long as if the PD is held to those uses, then it's fine. It's a color on the map. What's actually built always looks different than the color on the map. So I got myself over that. But there's a complication for me with the scale of what is of the buildings that would be along Narcoossee Road. So I imagine the bigger buildings are the ones that are 4-story. The little carriage units are 2-story. I just wouldn't want anything right up against the road as 4-story. You guys have mentioned doing the berm, but the berm still won't block a 4-story building. So as long as we have any multi-story, over 2-story buildings pulled back from Narcoossee Road a certain distance, we can have planning staff kind of look into the balance of the height of the berm with the view shed up to the height of the building, of how far to pull it back. So that's kind of a thought of mine on that. Buffers, the only mention of buffers in the PD was between commercial and residential, and there wasn't any mention of it surrounding it. So I didn't know if that meant you guys were following code for all the other buffer areas, and you just mentioned the one in the middle? Okay, because I didn't see that. And usually if anything different than code is mentioned with landscaping, that carries and not current code. So I just want to make sure that medium buffers would still have to be provided all the way around the project, as is the current code, because of the difference in uses. On the streets, are the streets going to be publicly maintained or privately maintained?
Some of them are right-of-way. The connection out to what would eventually go to Lillian would be right-of-way, and that's the only one, correct?
Okay, so the townhome, I imagine the multifamily wouldn't be.
Public. Yeah, that would also, when we come in with a PSP or to do the townhomes, those would then become public roads.
Okay, because I have a little bit of a concern, and it just seems like on townhome developments, when you to try to even get the 4.5 units an acre, or 4.5 parks per unit, or 2.5, 3.5, anything, it's a sea of driveways and garages. So it's almost like an apartment parking lot. It's not really a public street at that point. And I guess if we're providing that public connection, we'd have to make sure that those roads are public. But it's just a concern of mine. It's just a public street, and you have 40 townhomes with now 50 or 60 driveways all backing out into it. It's just, that to me just doesn't make sense. But there's just something to talk through as we get further along in the process. Access management on Narcoossee Road was a concern of mine. I see in the map you guys did for the parking study, one of them was reduced down from a full access point to a right in, right out, but I just want to make sure that there's coordination with the county to make sure that access separation and everything makes sense along Narcoossee Road. What else? Yeah, so the biggest things for me were, and another thing, and this is just kind of a global discussion about the parking for townhomes specifically. I'm fine with the 3.5 units, or 3.5, keep on saying that, 3.5 parking spaces per unit, as long as we figure out something with trash collection. Because when in any of these townhomes, and even my garage isn't big enough if we had 2 cars in it to fit the garbage cans in it. So I don't know if we kind of almost mandate for townhome, single-family attached product to have trash collection be, kind of the commercial trash collection and recycling collection, because everyone's got 2 96-gallon trash cans in their garage that take up almost a whole parking spot. They're junk in the other half, and then there's not really any garage parking. So that's just something I want to talk through as well. But I think that's all my comments on this one.
Well, and Deputy Mayor, I think that there are a lot of those items that we're able to address. I just hate doing it at the dais,
At the land use,
without your staff sort of input and us using our design team to figure this all out. So, as we said, this is the first reading, and we'd appreciate it if we could transmit tonight, because that's what goes to the DEO and has the longest lead time, and either pass on first reading, and then between the 2 readings we can come back and add the conditions as needed to the PUD.
It's up to everyone. I don't think I've heard everyone's comments yet.
Well, I certainly agree with most of what's been said. I would certainly support the staff's recommendation, but I struggle with making any changes to the parking conditions that they've set forward. Do we have any other questions from council? Do you have anyone else that'd like to speak to this item on your staff?
No, sir.
All right.
There was a hand in the back, Mayor.
May I speak as a resident of Turtle Creek?
I'll make one exception. State your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Amy Van Riper. I'm at 1612 Snapper Street, St. Cloud. I actually wasn't planning on speaking today. I have an important question, I think, as we have been discussing it within Turtle Creek. We're not necessarily opposed to having, new buildings and stuff across the way. We're a little concerned with the density as it affects us as far as our driving. We have 3 entrances into Turtle Creek and the preserve at Turtle Creek, and we already have trouble sometimes getting out onto the street, and when you add hundreds of cars across. So our question really is, if this goes through, what kind of mitigation is going to happen on those 3 entrances? Are there going to be stoplights put in? Are there going to be something that's going to help out with the traffic there? Thank you.
Thank you. Andre, is that something that you could speak to?
Andre Anderson, Community Development Director, not particularly, but we do have a traffic impact analysis requirement when they come forward, so they'll have to address any kind of traffic impacts that they're going to be creating. And we had recently adopted that study requirement, so it will be addressed.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion or questions from council? Mr. Mazares?
Well, I was just going to try to make sure we understand. The applicant, of course, is asking that the 2 transmittal items, at least the 1 transmittal item, be moved forward so that this can move through the process. So if the council is not inclined to do that, the other alternative is to really hold off on all of it action, let staff work with the applicant and see if the applicant can be revised, because I don't know what the direction of the council is headed on this, but the key component right now is the transmittal of the zoning, so future land use, I'm sorry. So that's an option that the council has, and the applicant also has too, to essentially withdraw the request for action tonight and go back to the drawing board and then come back in front of the city council at a later date. So,
thank you. What is Councilmember Trace?
And that's my struggle with changing the color on the map red, is then it looks like, if the property to the east of this wants to go commercial, then it makes sense. This is really 3 different colors on the map of a little bit of commercial in the corner, high density residential, medium density residential, and then it transitions down to low density, which makes sense to me of that transition of density and intensity as you move further away from the main corridor, but just the color on the map looks weird. So, I don't.
What is the pleasure? Do I have a motion from the council concerning item number 2?
Motion to deny.
Second.
Mayor, we'd like to request a continuance.
Okay. So you'd like to withdraw these items and
We'd like to continue it to work through the details that we've heard are the concerns tonight.
okay.
Can I ask planning director a question, I guess? How far off from meeting the mixed-use code was this? Was it a little bit, or was it way far off to meet the MXD code?
Somewhere in the middle. It wasn't a tiny thing, and it wasn't a huge thing, but there are some very specific standards that they are just not able to achieve with a mixed-use district.
Okay. And if this came back as a high-density residential, would commercial uses be allowed as an ancillary use to high-density residential?
Our code does not provide for residential, commercial uses in residential uses as a conventional zoning. We have 2 plan unit development zoning categories: residential PUDs and commercial PUDs. And the residential PUD I don't think it allows for enough commercial that they're trying to achieve there. So that's one thing that we're looking at, how to revise our land development code to provide greater flexibility and address the need for mixed use without achieving the mixed use zoning district.
Okay. This is a question for the city attorney, I guess. Is it possible to take the application and split up the land use into different, have a legal description for specific land uses?
It is, but it's not set up for you to do it that way tonight.
Tonight, yeah, I get that.
So, yes, you could. And Mayor, I know that you received a motion and a second with regard to it. However, this is introduction and first reading, and the applicant in that is usually should be given the afford to have the full final hearing at the point that comes before the city council, whether it's after transmittal on the land use or at the final hearing related to the PUD. So I think it would be prudent to accept or at least to grant their request to continue for a period of time so that they can work on it. And of course, when it comes back, you can address some of the same issues if they haven't been addressed at this point, but at least give them the opportunity to work through some of them before it would be denied.
And that's what I'm trying to get at of, what is the avenue to get to the finish line on that? And I think it takes some input from us as well.
So what do I need to do as far as this request for continuance?
I would think if one of the councils is so inclined, you could just move to continue. I don't know how much time the applicant is looking for, but it would seem to me to be at least, Andre, what would you say, 30 days? At least 30 days.
30 days.
So they need to bring it back again, right?
Yeah, and of course, again, as with any continuance or table matter, if they come back before you and they haven't addressed these issues, then you have the option of basically saying, no, we told you what you wanted and you didn't do it, so.
Do I need a motion for that?
Do I
Yes.
need to withdraw my motion?
If you're willing to, that would be good.
That was my next question. Are you willing to withdraw your motion and substitute it?
Sure, but I'm going to say for the record too, I won't flex on the parking either. I'll
I'm not
withdraw my
gonna flex.
motion.
There's no give, not with me.
So could I have a motion for
I did.
continuance?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, she's withdrawn her motion.
So now we
for
need a motion to
denial.
continue the item for.
April 8th.
Wow.
April 8th, and then the 15th is a workshop. So it's either 8th or 22nd.
Gallery over here wants the 22nd.
Applicant.
That's fine, isn't it?
It's up to the applicant. I mean,
Is-
We may need some time to work on it. I don't even know what today is. Today's 11th. We
11th.
can be ready by the 8th. Yeah, that gives us about a month. But
Well,
Andre
staff
needs
would like
more
to
time.
have to the 22nd.
if we
20
continue it to the 8th, but we're not ready, then we can continue it without having to show up to the 22nd.
Well, they're going to continue it for a time certain, so it'll be on the agenda for whatever date it's continued to. So it'll have to be an agenda item. I'd suggest then, Ms. Wilson, that you just continue to the 22nd, the way staff has, and then I'll give you enough time to address the issue without getting, bumping up against an artificial deadline.
Acceptable?
Yes.
All right, could I have a motion for continuance to April the 22nd? I have a
moved.
motion from Councilmember Trace. Do I have a second? I'll second it. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Askew,
No.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
yes?
Councilmember Matheny,
No.
Councilmember Cooper,
No,
Mayor Blackwell.
Yes.
All right, so now you don't have,
Motion
a-
denied, 2 to 3.
all right, so we need an action then. So you want to go back to whatever motion you want to make on the first item, and then that'll, I guess if the first item is, well, let's take a motion on item number 2
Mayor,
then.
we're going to officially withdraw.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So that will be a withdrawal of items 2, 3, and 7.
Items 2, 3, and 7 have been withdrawn by the applicant. Brings us to item number 4. Madam Clerk?
First reading and introduction for ordinance number 2021-04, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, amending an ordinance which assigned a zoning district of Planned Unit Development, PUD, to Anthem Park, located east of the Florida Turnpike, west of Old Canoe Creek Road, described further herein, providing for the approval of the revisions of the final master plan, providing for the filing provisions of the Planning Commission, recommendation, proof of publication, severability, conflicts, and effective date.
Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is the first public hearing for Ordinance 2021-04 for the Anthem Park PUD amendment and revision to the final master plan. Next slide. The existing zoning of this property is planned unit development. The future land use is medium density residential. And this PUD was approved back in 2004. It's approximately 260 acres. This is the total project. And it was proposed to be developed in 5 phases. It was proposed for up to 999 residential units. And the reason that is because back then, if you tripped the 1,000 mark, you were considered a development of regional impact. And so 1 unit under that threshold made it a regular development, and tracks G and M at that time were permitted for single-family attached housing. So this shows a portion of the project that's being recommended for revision to the final master plan, and it was originally approved for 264 condominium units, and phase 4, which is referred to as tract G, and phase 5, which is a future phase 5, is tract M. Next slide, please. The proposed amendment is for the addition of townhomes as a permitted use and a reduction from the Land Development Code parking requirements from 4.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 3.5 spaces per dwelling unit. There's no adverse impact to facilities at this time. Next slide, please. Further background, and to give you a little more context, again, as I said, it was approved in 2004, August 12th, through Ordinance 2004-32, and as I said, up to 999 units were recommended for residential use at a density of 4.85 dwelling units per acre. The portion that's in the top right corner is the area that was shown for commercial uses. Back then was referred to as tracts 66, 67, and 70, and again, it was recommended for 5 phases. Next slide. Further background, phase 4 final master plan was approved January of 2007, and then per the Land Development Code, section 3.10.1, once you receive approval of a final master plan, you're required to construct substantial development within 3 years. That did not happen, so then they requested an extension prior to expiration based on Senate Bill 360, which occurred back in 2009 regarding the growth management legislation. And then that would give them a 2-year extension. Then they made a second request based on House Bill 7207, which was the Community Planning Act, and that then gave them an extension until January 25th, 2014. The image you see there is what was approved at that time for 168 units at 7.38 dwelling units per acre. Next slide, please. Regarding phase 5, tract M, final master plan was approved June 22nd, 2006, and that expiration would have been 3 years later based on the Land Development Code requirement. And they requested that first extension, again based on Senate Bill 360, to June 2011, and then requested a second extension based on House Bill 7207. However, the date changed because I think there was a tolling period that was involved, why the date was now January 25th, 2013. Next slide. This is an image of the actual proposed townhome layout for tracts G and M. Tract G is going to be developed as phase 1 with 144 units, and tract M is going to be developed as phase 2 with 48 units for a total of 192 units. Next slide. This is consistent with our growth management goal for community development, and DRC and staff recommends approval of Ordinance 2021-04 with the condition that there be a minimum of 3.5 spaces per dwelling unit for tracks G and M, 1 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and 1/2 space per unit on street parking. Just by a little more explanation, when they submitted this application originally, they had also submitted a parking determination request, and the request was to reduce the parking to 3.6, no, I'm sorry, 3.08, I think, was less than what we're recommending. And then we noted that in our code, the city manager has the discretion to reduce the parking requirement by 20%, which would then bring it to 3.61. And so staff is recommending 3.51, and to approve at 3.61 would also require a parking study, which was included in the application. So recommendation for you tonight is to approve the PUD amendment and revision to the final master plan with 3.5 spaces for tracks G and M. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. The applicant is here.
Would the applicant like to speak at this time? Please step forward, share your name.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brock Altafer with Osceola Engineering, 1003 Florida Avenue, and I'm representing the applicant. We are in agreement with staff's recommendations. There's a couple of things that I'd like to address. First off, this was part of a master plan community that was designed for 999 units. There was only about 640 that have been constructed to date, so the master infrastructure for this area is designed for an additional 350 some odd units. We're only proposing 192 with this. So the master infrastructure being the roadway infrastructure, the parks, the recreational amenities, the pool, all of those shared open space and amenity elements, along with the roadway infrastructure and the utility infrastructure, was sized for a much higher density than what we're applying for today. So I would like to make that known. There were several things that were brought up in the previous application that also pertain to this that I would like to address. First off, parking definitely being a concern. We originally submitted an application with much less parking, and at the Planning Commission meeting, we heard the voice of the residents and the commission, and we conceded to move from the 3.01 that we had originally planned to 3.5. After which, talking with staff and residents a little bit more, we came up with a plan that you see before you today at 3.6 parking spaces per unit. So we have gone above. We've since had conversations with a couple of the council members that asked us to go higher, and we haven't had a chance to really do anything about that. This application was submitted quite a while ago. So we have heard the concerns, but we feel that based on the 3.6 that we had addressed the concerns of the neighborhood and of staff. One reason we feel that is these units that we're proposing, these are first-time homebuyer units. These are our 3-bedroom townhomes. They range from 1,300 square feet up to about 1,500 square feet. These are truly intended for small families with small children. They're not the 5-bedroom houses that you see in other portions of developments like this that have several teenage kids with cars plus parents with cars. These are intended for parents with small children, and that is the demographic that this is intended for. A few of the other issues that were brought up, the sea of parking, and this is one thing that's incorrect about the staff approval. The sea of parking where you have 2 parking spaces on every single townhome in the driveway, we're not proposing that with this. We're proposing 2 parking spaces on the very end units where there's extra space in between the townhomes. All the other units, we're only gonna have 1 parking space in the garage to provide more green space, more open space in the front, provide more landscape area, so it is softer. It's not just that sea of parking that you see. The remaining parking would be through on-street parking, and the plan you have shows quite a bit of on-street parking. The total number is 228 on-street parking spaces to support this development. The trash collection was another thing that was brought up. We did think about that. If you're using your garage as a parking space, you can't fit a garbage can in it. So our plan does show centralized trash collection, and the HOA would work with trash management or waste management to ensure adequate pickup to address that concern. So with that, I will answer any questions that you have.
Okay, if you'll hold on for just a minute. We'll receive any comment from the audience. Mr. Gerald Bergeron, please come forward. You have 3 minutes to share with us. If you'll state your name and address for the record.
My name's Gerald Bergeron, 4750 Capitol Boulevard, St. Cloud. I understand what the gentleman was saying, but I also know when we moved in here about 13 years ago, we lived in Anthem Park in the townhomes. And to think that you can fit 3.5 cars is all you need for that, it's a pipe dream. In reality, people nowadays, they don't have just one car and family, 2 cars. All you need is one teenager. And we're talking 3-bedroom apartments, so there's going to be more than one teenager involved. And there is a townhome development on Boggy Creek where they have the 1-car garage and the 1-car driveway, and the rest park on the street. And if they had a fire there, I just don't know. I'm talking at night when almost everybody is home. It's just, they park anywhere they can. If there's an open space between cars, not big enough to pull in parallel, they'll just pull in onto the green. It's a nice thought to think that you can do that, but Anthem Park right now was built correctly. They have a lot of green space, they have a lot of parking, and everybody's happy there. You don't see the streets so crowded you can't get a fire truck down. And I'd hate to see this just across Lexington Avenue from us, what it's going to do to our property values. When people come in and they see this parking lot with 1-car garage, 1-car driveway, it just, I'm sorry, it just doesn't fit, not with Anthem Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Harold Ellens.
Harold Ellens, 1841 Remembrance Avenue. Thank you for your time. I do have 90+ signatures that are people from Anthem Park who do not want to see the reduced parking of this development. We have a congestion issue with the middle school in the back of the subdivision. I would invite the City Hall to come and watch that during drop-off pickup. Add another 175 units times 2 cars per unit. That's going to be a mess. And last November, City Council voted to approve the Orange Grove development, which I understand based on the notes and the records that one of the exits from that Orange Grove, which is on the corner of Neptune and Old Canoe Creek, will come through Betsy Ross. So all of a sudden, you've got potential of 900 additional units times 2 cars exiting out on Lexington. That's a challenge for us. The other question I would like to know, I've asked the builder, and he didn't know at the time, was who will own the roads? They will build them, they will build the lighting and put all that stuff up, but who will maintain that? Is that the HOA's responsibility? Is that the city's responsibility? We'd like to know what that is. And with regards to the gentleman's comment just before me, a fellow resident, My perspective is slightly different than his, namely that when they built Anthem Park, they built narrow roads. 60 to 70% of our residents use their garage for other things, storage, etc., because they don't have basements. That's common in Florida, not common up north. That puts people in the driveway and parking on the street. When you get street parking both directions, we have trouble with mail, and I understand this will be centrally located, so that's not an issue. But when you have that and fire departments come on a call, we've had cases where the fire truck hits another car or can't get through, and that's all issues that we need to resolve and consider. I would hate for them to inherit the legacy that we've got with the narrow roads. So ask that you just consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this item in the audience? Please step forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Lisa Klepper, 908 Michigan, and also 1752 up the road. I also want to voice my disapproval for the reduction in parking. Several things as far as he is talking about a smaller home, and I say, yep, that means there's no storage. That means they're not parking any car in that garage because they're going to use that storage. Planning to have street parking as our default. One, if I live somewhere and I get home later than everybody else on my street, now I'm driving around trying to find a parking space. If I'm gearing a development to young children, now I have young children where they kick the ball. It goes out in the road. It's in between those cars. They go run out in the road because that's what kids do. I think we're just setting it up to have some heartbreak in a neighborhood when you set up a neighborhood to say they're going to have street parking and that's how these people are going to park. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
You need to fill out a form. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
To the clerk, please. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Mohammed Abdullah with Traffic and Mobility Consultants. I'm here with the applicant team. Just wanted to discuss or address the parking concerns and let you know about the work that we did in preparation for this application and working with city staff regarding the requested parking reduction. Address is 3101 McGuire Boulevard, Orlando 32803.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So in preparation for this request, we prepared a parking analysis, and what we did is, you see a lot of parking analyses come before you that say, this publication, ITE and ULI, as the previous speaker, Ms. Wilson, mentioned, recommend this ratio versus that ratio per land use, which is great. I mean, those are great resources. We rely on them in our profession quite a bit. However, we understand the sensitivity of parking in the city. So what we did is we went out and did an actual survey of similar uses, similar communities in St. Cloud to see what is the parking experience in those communities. Specifically, we looked at 4 townhome developments in the city, and what we did in that study is we did a survey from 3 to 5 in the morning when everyone's home, and we also did a survey after work from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, I'll double check, but basically the return home time when everyone's coming home after work, just to see what is that demand that's being experienced. And what we found was the supply, basically what the average number of parking spaces that were planned for in those communities. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to the correct page here on my report. So the average supply is just under 3 parking spaces per unit. That's what they've provided. and the average demand is just under 2 parking spaces per unit. And we think, well, how could that be? Every house has a couple people, and then they have children, and that's true. A lot of houses have multiple vehicles, and a lot of houses have a single vehicle. And these types of smaller houses, they tend to be either first-time or downsized homes. So you tend to see a varying car ownership experience across the unit types, and that's where you come in. That's how we came in with the 2 parking spaces per unit as a demand. Now, looking at the national averages, ITE has looked at 77 townhome communities across the country. The range of parking demand is just about 1.25 per unit on the low side. On the high side is 2.3 parking spaces per unit. That is the national experience. So the range is that. The average supply is 1.5 parking spaces per unit. This application is at 3.5 parking spaces per unit, or a little bit over 700 parking spaces. Your typical Publix is parked at about 200 to 250 parking spaces, and that's a sea of parking that you see out there. So 700 parking spaces is a significant amount of parking to meet the demand that's experienced right here in our community for parking for uses of this type. And so it's our opinion that 3.6 is a very conservative supply of parking for a community like this. If you have any questions.
Thank you. I'll make one more exception, ma'am.
Well,
You need to
hang on a
step forward.
second.
You got to step forward, ma'am.
Mayor, maybe you finished with listening to this individual first?
Sir?
Are you finished with the?
Yeah, he was asking for questions. Does
Okay.
anyone have any questions you'd like to ask him?
Thank you.
I'm going to let you come, ma'am. This will be the last time I let anyone from the audience speak, because we get out of time for that earlier, please.
Thank you. Eileen Perez, 4750 Capitol Boulevard. My question is, what community was surveyed for that? Is it a retirement community? That's quite different. We have townhouses already in Anthem Park, and the need for parking is seen that it's high and necessary. So we need to compare apples with apples. I'd like to know what communities he got his
Thank you.
documents.
Thank you, ma'am. Did you hear the question?
Yes, sir. I'm getting so the communities that were looked at were Magnolia Glen, Village Green, Canoe Creek, and the Sanctuary.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask?
Not for him, but I have some questions.
Is Andre here? Andre, the question was asked, who will own the roads? Could you please answer and address that question?
Hi, Brock Alte for Osceola Engineering. That was actually something we worked out with staff during the DRC process. And the primary roads within Tract G would be owned by the city. Those are your standard roadways, standard curb. But anywhere where there's an inverted crown with parking on it, that would be owned and maintained by the newly formed HOA. The existing HOAs would not partake in that. This would all be part of the new development.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions you'd like to ask Rob while he's here?
Well, I asked the question, I think you and I did. Getting to the 4 parking facilities where each home, you said, yeah, you could take out 4 or 5 homes there. Have you looked at about doing that? Or are you thinking not to? Or where are you at with that?
And just to bring everyone in, we had a discussion late last week or earlier this week to get Council Member Cooper's feelings on the application.
Okay, hang on.
And
Mr. Mayor, if I could, please.
Yes,
Mr. Cooper, you are obligated at this point to disclose that under this quasi-judicial proceeding.
Yes, sir, I had a meeting with him.
And you discussed
that you had a discussion with?
Yes, we had discussion about the parking facility.
Yes.
Thank you.
So parking was brought up as a concern, and unfortunately, this application you see before you today was submitted quite a while ago, so there was not the opportunity to incorporate really any changes into the site plan. So what we're bringing forward today is the plan that was submitted probably a month ago or something like that. We have looked at the potential to increase parking, and by eliminating units, there is the potential to increase parking. That's just when you lose townhomes, you can gain more asphalt.
Okay.
If we get to a point where, it's an absolute necessity, we can relook at the site plan and see what is required. But there are a few other things that I think were brought up that I would like to address, if that's okay, unless there's other questions, specific questions.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Askew.
I guess one of the things that concerns me, in Anthem Park, it just seems like I'm not going to say it's a hot mess of parking, but there's definitely some challenges, and it's just strange to me that when you did your parking study, you didn't even do what was right next to you. That's what the first thing that lit up to me. But anyway, in the engineering part, I guess one of the biggest concerns is that we don't have anything going north, and there's going to be a big development there, which that's going to be most likely mixed use and commercial in there, which we would like a flow of back and forth. And I think at one time we talked about some kind of movement, I think on the lower portion, Canoe Creek, Old Canoe Creek Road over there. So with that big development up there, we don't have anything planned to interconnect to that at all?
Well, there is that main roadway that leads over to the school that could be connected to in the future, but we really don't have control over that. But there's absolutely the opportunity to connect in the future when that developer comes through.
Okay, yeah, it just seems like it would be, I would assume, I'm not an engineer, but I would assume that would be planned in there now. The road shows it's there, and then when they will connect to it. But it just seems like there's nothing being talked about there, and having everybody spill out onto Old Canoe Creek Road, which I guess I'll say the same thing. That's a hot mess too. So we're just going to add more and more traffic out there. So I don't know, is there some way we can look into that where we can meet with the school and see if we can, I think Ms. Matheny brought it up before, so.
So to answer your first question, the reason Anthem Park wasn't part of the study, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a mixed-use development, so there is the intermingling of single-family detached and single-family attached. So it wouldn't really be a true representation of what we're proposing here, which is strictly townhomes. These pods are pretty much completely separate from the existing, so it would function separate from the existing Anthem Park. We're kind of on the opposite sides without interconnects with the existing developments.
Okay. It's just hard for me to split the two. When you've been and saw what one's doing, now we're going to redo it, and we're talking about parking. It just seems like we should try to address that, that's
Understood. And I think something else to reiterate is parcel G was originally planned for a much higher density. It was 190 units on that parcel alone. And the parking ratio at the time, which I believe with the city was around 3 parking spaces per unit. Tract M, which is the eastern parcel, was originally approved with 96 apartment units in 3-story buildings. The parking ratio for that was 2 per unit. So what was previously approved on this and what we're coming before you today is much, much different. It's much more in line with what the city wants to see now. We don't want to change things so much that it makes it completely inconsistent with the design standards of the existing Anthem Park. It makes sense to have this be kind of be somewhat in line with the original design intent, but more closely meet the city's current standards.
Okay.
And that was our goal with what we did with the site plan you see.
All right, thanks.
There were a couple of other issues, one of them being the existing developments in the community not having enough parking spaces. I think the city updated their parking code recently to require quite a bit more parking. If you look back in the past, which I assume these townhomes that are being referenced, the parking count was not anywhere near 3.6, I don't believe. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I think we're not comparing apples to apples, as was stated before. Fire departments on the street system, your fire department did review this plan, and they did not have any comments or concerns about what we gave them. So I do want to say that. Who owns the roads? We talked about that. Also was a concern for narrow roads. All of the publicly maintained roads will meet the city's minimum standards for roadway width. So that will not be a concern. Also, because there's enough parking in the designated parking areas, there will not be the allowance for on-street parking like you see in other portions of the neighborhoods. So this is, we feel that we have addressed the concerns that have been brought up previously.
Ladies first.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. I'm gonna need Andre up here probably. I don't know where he is. So first I'd like to thank the citizens all for coming and talking about the parking. This is a constant conversation that we have up here as city council, and I feel like St. Cloud's been pretty progressive requiring all this extra parking, and we have been doing it for many years up here because we all know you drive into the neighborhoods, people are all parked on the streets, you gotta skirt your way down the middle, and then you think, gosh, how do they pick up the trash? God forbid a fire truck needs to come through, like what happens? So we all talk about it. Again, I'm not gonna support a reduced parking on this, but I wanted to clarify because I think it's kind of confusing to people listening. When they're talking about on-street parking, they're actually designating parallel parking spaces on the side outside the travel lanes. So it's like in some communities, the car parks on the street in the travel lane. That's also called on-street parking, so it's confusing. So they're talking about designating spaces. So I think it is a challenge. So I live in a community that has quads and duplexes and stuff and single-car garages. And the problem with single-car garages is you're gonna have two cars, but whoever gets home first leaves first. So you're constantly doing this jockeying car thing, and then most people, like you said, don't park in their garage. I mean, it just kind of cycles. Mr. Trace had a good point, like whenever we do the two-car driveway, it just ends up being driveway, 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 and then that doesn't look good either. So, Mr. Anderson, and maybe the more elegant solution is do we alley load these townhomes to move the parking in the driveways and the backside of the buildings so that, you know, they're not visible from the street, and then that kind of cleans up some of the view. But I did have a challenge with this application, and I do know that there's a problem when school twice a day, that Lexington Avenue is stacked with cars. I provided a photo to city staff, and I said, I don't really know what the school is doing operationally, but it appears that they just shut the gates and don't let anybody in, and an hour before school lets out, it was about 0.6 of a mile.
Yes.
I measured on Google Earth.
Yep.
So I do know that the city manager sent out the police department today. They flew it with a drone. I don't know what kind of footage they got today, but I think we've got some updates on that. So initially, I wanted to deny this application because of all of these problems, of the car stacking on the road, but then I kind of had the challenge of, well, that's the school, not this site, and then also I was told that basically if we deny it, they get a previous approval, which is more units than what they're proposing. So I didn't want to, we've had that situation before where we want to deny somebody, but then they get an earlier approval, which is less desirable than what they're proposing. So I think they mentioned it, but I want to say they could build 264 condos, but this, if we deny it and it goes back to a previous approval, but what they're proposing is 192 townhomes.
They can't do that, can they? They can't.
So that's the rub, right? Like, how do we resolve all this stuff? So I did ask the city manager to reach out to the school district and say, what are you guys doing operationally with this, and how do you fix it? Because you can't stack your people all on our public roads.
No.
So I'm thinking Mr. Reinhardt maybe has some information for us about the school traffic.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Mayor, may I be recognized? If I could have Chief Reinhardt come up. Kelly, do you have that picture? Could you put that up? Just put some context on it. And
Oh, yeah, this
Councilmember Matheny,
this is my picture I took yesterday. But
what time was that, please?
what was an hour before school let out? So it was Wednesday, so I think school lets out 2:20, so it was about 1:20 on, and so this is the last street before you get to Old Canoe Creek Road, and if you measure it on Google, it's like 0.6 of a mile, but these are cars just stopped. Now, right now, the people inside of Anthem Park, we've got a few people here, but my understanding is they can maneuver, they can navigate this because it's 4 lanes. They're stacked in the outside lane. So right now they can bypass the cars and still do what they need to do. But then we throw in all this development and all the driveways and all these cars. So that's why I was just like, I wanted, I wanted to deny it. But then when you tell me they could build more if I deny it, then, so I'm hoping Mr. Reinhardt has some good information for us.
Well, in reference to the
Could you please state your name, please?
Deputy Chief Fran Reinhardt from the Police Department. In reference to the traffic issues at Neptune Elementary School and the car stacking, it's not a new issue. However, there are several schools in the district that are having the same or similar issues. And we noted in our survey or in our study recently that the issue is mainly, or is more so in the morning than it is in the afternoon. And we have a couple of reasons why it is. There's more stacking in the morning time. And that's in the morning time, the students that are at the school, they have to be COVID screened before they go in. So that causes a substantial delay, and so causes more cars to back up. In addition to that, when we've spoken to the school has to abide by the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, which states that they need to have separate entries and exits for the buses, the car riders, and the school staff. So that's in the past, it's hindered our ability to resolve that issue. As you mentioned today, we sent out our drones and surveyed the area, and we have future plans to speak with the school staff and the school board security personnel in order to resolve those issues. So that's kind of where we stand with that.
So, Mr. Manzares, I guess my question is, I understand the school has state rules that they have to do, but I also feel like they should be stacking these cars on their own property. So do we have any legal power to be like, get off, you got to get off of the road, you can't stack? I mean, if they just say, sorry, we don't want to, or we don't have space.
Stopping and standing on a public right-of-way is a
violation of the law. Yes,
violation.
it is. Yes, it is. So we've done it before at other schools where we have moved the traffic along and tell them that they need to continue moving, and that is an option. It does upset a lot of people when you do that, because they're just going in a circle and coming back around and waiting for traffic to clear.
Right, I definitely want to work with the school district, but I also know from my personal experience that it doesn't usually resolve, honestly. So, this is why I was so adamantly opposed to the schools on Canoe Creek Road, because this is what's going to happen. But I just wanted to kind of say that for the record, that, I wanted to not move forward with this application, but not moving forward is a worse situation because they can build.
Well, hang on, Ms. Matheny, can I
70.
just clarify one issue on that?
Mhm.
As you heard Mr. Anderson give you the longstanding history of this project, the current approvals that were essentially expired. So there is a question about whether their entitlements are still in place that you were talking about. So I don't think it's truly set in stone, for lack of a better expression, that if you deny this, they automatically go back to the higher density that's in there.
Okay, I thought that's what you told me on the phone yesterday, so.
No, what I told you on the phone yesterday
You were
is
saying
that-
it was highly likely that they were going to get the previous approval.
Well, when we talked about this on the phone yesterday, there was a little bit of confusion as to where they were on it. And what I suggested to you is that if you denied this, it would go back to whatever the entitlement was that was in place. We since found out that the entitlements that were in place are no longer in place because they didn't get their final master plan approved with it. They didn't comply with the final master plan that was approved a few years back, and Andre has the timeline. I think it was 2013. In 2013. So it would go back to, and so couldn't go back to that because that master plan was never complied with.
Okay, well, that's different than the conversation we had yesterday.
That was what I asked Bill Sturgeon, just not.
So, The
2 hours
conversation
ago.
I was told yesterday was that it would go back to the condos. So, I mean, for me, I would rather, I don't know if they want to withdraw the application or continue it or whatever, but I feel like the parking needs to be reworked. I agree with Councilmember Askew that the access to the north, not on Betsy Ross, but through, make a connection to the north to the Neptune Village or whatever it's called, provide a cross connection into that. You know, I would like to see the plan reworked, possibly rear load it to help with the parking and the, I think it looks nicer too.
And they need to cut down some of the homes. I think
And
maybe
for
they're,
me, and for me, I don't support reducing the parking.
no.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to advise the council, I did speak to the superintendent, and they are committed to trying to solve this problem through their safety and security director, and we've been in contact with him, and we'll keep you up to date on that.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember
Nope.
Matheny? Councilmember Trace.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I thank the residents for coming out and speaking about this. I know parking is always a challenge. And Ms. Eileen's comment about in the parking study, certain communities being, I don't think they're age restricted, but they're more active adult than family. So I took that into account when I was looking at that study of the Sanctuary, which is definitely a family community. Their ratio right now of parking demand is 2.31, and then Magnolia Glen is another one that seems more family than the other two, and that's at 1.87. The other ones were, you know, in the low ones. So with that, I did take that into account when we're looking at the parking study. And then I think Councilwoman Matheny mentioned, you know, there is a big difference in my mind of designated on-street parking versus non-designated on-street parking, and we just need to get out of the business of non-designated on-street parking because it's a mess. It's a enforcement issue of trying to make sure, well, you know, my house is on this side of the road, so I want to park on this side, but there's no parking on this side, so you got to park on the other in someone's front yard, and it's just a mess. I'd rather have designated parking areas. A couple of my big issues were brought up: the trash collection in townhome communities with the large cans that we have just seems like an issue, and the truck getting in and out of all the areas. School coordination is a huge issue because it backs up onto Neptune every once in a while. I drive that way every morning and every afternoon, and I do see it back up all the time. Some of it I think is also from the daycare center, just kind of getting right there, but definitely a big concern of mine. And you know, thank you staff for reaching out to the school district and trying to figure out a way to massage that. I did want to, as part of this, if it does move forward, just have all of these streets be privately maintained streets, because it's really, if you have a driveway every 10 feet or 20 feet down here, it's not a public street like a normal public street without driveways every 10 feet. So I think we just need to change the standard in some of these townhome communities of figure out the parking, figure out the trash pickup, and figure out the right-of-way section that makes sense for that. It might just have to be they're all privately maintained instead of publicly maintained. Then my last thing was that my parents actually live on Nathan Hale, so I drive this stretch particularly all the time, and there is that very nice buffer on the east side of Lexington for about halfway down or 2/3 of the way down. And if this does move forward with non-alley loaded townhomes that back up to Lexington, I'd like to see this same buffer that we're seeing on the screen continued all the way down Lexington to kind of buffer that. I think that would do a good job at, you know, kind of blocking that view shed down Lexington for the other residents that come in down that corridor. I think that is all my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, you want to speak?
Yes, sir. Jason Miller, your local fire chief here in St. Cloud. I'd like to clarify a couple of items here. Yes, our fire truck did have an accident in that neighborhood. It was right near one of the little roundabout areas. The car was parked too close, and we clipped it. We couldn't make it around. Unfortunately, we did have an incident there. As to the fire official addressing these plans in review, the fire official only speaks to the fire code. He does not speak to the parking code. That is not our code to speak to. However, in the future, we will be speaking to it. I cannot support in good faith not allocating the 4 parking units per unit. That neighborhood is tight. The roads are narrow. There's cars parked on both sides of the road on a regular, consistent basis. It's one of the reasons why we changed the design of our fire trucks. Plain and simple, I've given our firefighters the authorization to push cars out of the way. It's a scary time. With that, the neighborhood's congested. Adding the school to it, adding more cars to it, it doesn't add up. I understand engineering. Engineers have great plans. Unfortunately, plans don't always meet reality. We are in a situation now where we have multi-generational people living in the same house, which means you could have grandmother, grandfather, grandmother, grandfather, son, daughter. That's 6 adults that are driving. That's something else that has to take into consideration. I think pretty much you know where I stand. I can't support the without four parking spots per unit. So,
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
thank you.
So, I have a question, Chief. So that's not, there's a difference to me of access for the fire truck and turning radii and everything and parking. You know, I don't support any undesignated or even designated on-street parking in this. All of the parking areas, I do see 2 little areas now that I look at it closer of parallel spaces along the right-of-way, but all of the other areas are essentially like a driveway, right? They're off the road, you have 24 feet of pavement. Does that cause an issue for getting in and out?
So less so much with the rescues, a little bit more so with the engines. They're longer wheelbase, longer turning. In the future, when we have another tower truck, which this being a multi-story development going on in there, that would be an automatic dispatched unit to those areas. You get cars on both sides, even though they're kind of off to the side. It takes a good 24 feet sometimes for those tower trucks to set up and operate and still have maneuverability for other vehicles to get by. Again, I have concerns just because we all know that parking can be designated, but that doesn't mean people are going to park there. We see it all the time. I mean, even down, if you take a look at the, the cannery little park there down by Michigan. There for a while, you had great parking spots there, but people parked wherever they wanted to because they wanted to take their kids to the park. We've experienced that same thing in these neighborhoods time and time again where it's designated parking, but yet you'll still find sometimes vehicles double parked in the middle of the road in the middle of the night. It happens. So,
And that's
again,
why private road HOA can tell them, right?
That's not for me to speak to.
Okay. Because back to the turning radius, I was under the assumption every single site plan that comes through has an auto turn analysis with it that you guys approve for your apparatus that you have. Is that not the case?
On the vast majority of them, yes, sir. I can't speak to this one specifically, but 99% of the time it's not an issue. That assumption is done. The AutoCAD turning radius is taken into account. I can't speak to this one specifically because
I don't think it's gotten that far in the process, but
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
We have any other questions?
Brock Alte for Osceola Engineering, and I can address a few of those concerns. The turning radius has been designed to meet the fire standards in the Land Development Code, and also in the areas where we have on-street parking, we are providing a 24-foot drive aisle, which is what said is what is needed for the fire apparatus. You had brought up continuing the buffer along Lexington Boulevard. And it is our intention to continue that existing berm with the landscape berm that's on the north side of Lexington. Details we would get into at the final engineering plans. But it sounds like at this point that there's a few concerns that we can address. We just need a little bit more time to implement them into our site plan and present it back to you. So I would like to request that we continue this application to give us a little bit more time to work with staff and address some of the concerns that we've heard tonight and come back before you at a later date.
Mayor, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't have an official conversation with Mr. Altafer, but I did run into him at the Planning Commission meeting. We did talk about this project, I just want to say that, and I did bring up the school issue, the stacking, and those items. It was a couple weeks ago before the application made it to us with the details, so that's what we talked about.
And we have reached out to the school board. There was a meeting, I believe yesterday, with the applicant and the school board. I just don't have the details of that, so I didn't bring it up tonight.
Thank you. The applicants requested a continuance.
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Yes, we need
I'll
a
make a
motion.
motion to continue to a date certain.
Well, yeah, we'd like a date, sure. Well, I don't know how much time does the applicant think they need?
What are the next dates? I think the 25th is one. What is the following date?
I mean, the date in
The council meeting?
April 8th
April 8th?
and then April 22nd.
Okay. April 8th? Does that, you think, give us adequate time, Andre? April 22nd?
I'll make a motion to continue until April 22nd.
Second.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to item number 5. Madam Clerk, please
First
read.
reading transmittal for ordinance number 2021-06, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a future land use designation of public to approximately 16.36 acres identified as Osceola County Roads and Bridge, located generally northwest of the intersection of Old Canoe Creek Road and Nolte Road, east of the Florida Turnpike and south of Neptune Road, providing for amending of the official future land use map of the comprehensive plan, following the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, applicability and effect, severability copies on file and effective date.
Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. Mr. Mayor, may I ask that you also read the next item?
Would you please read item number 6?
First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2021-07, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a zoning district of P professional compatible with public institutional future land use designation for approximately 16.36 acres identified as Osceola County Roads and Bridge Facility, located generally northwest of the intersection of Old Canoe Creek Road, Nolte Road, east of the Florida Turnpike and south of Neptune Road, providing for entering the designation of official zoning map, finding the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, severability, conflicts, and effective date.
Thank you. This is the first public hearing for the DRC case CPA 20-0008, ordinance number 2021-06. It's for a publicly owned facility, Osceola County Road and Bridge facility, and it's requesting a land use change for the property. This was annexed a couple years ago, and since it's a public facility, it would have the land use decision after the fact. So the request is for a land use of professional. The existing future land use is medium density residential, and it says the proposed use is for public institutional. It's already existing development that's on the site, and so there's no additional adverse impacts to city facilities. It's considered with a strategic goal for growth management, and DRC and staff at a meeting on December 10th recommend approval of ordinance 2021-06, and the Planning Commission at their meeting recommended approval of ordinance 2021-06 and transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for interagency review, and asking the City Council to do the same based on the 16 findings in the Land Development Code. The next item is ZMA 20-0008, which is the corresponding zoning to the future land use change for ordinance 2021-07. Next slide. The background here, the zoning was PUD. The proposed zoning is P for professional, and it's again an existing development, so there's no adverse impacts to city facilities at this time. It's consistent with the strategic plan goal for growth management, and DRC and staff at our meeting on January 22nd recommend approval of ordinance 2021-07, and the Planning Commission at their meeting also recommended approval of ordinance 2021-07 and ask that the City Council do the same. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Would anyone in the audience like to speak to item number 5 or 6? If not, we'll have discussion and/or motion by council. Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. So I guess this question is for the attorney, maybe, I'm not sure. So as you know, this is an active road and bridge site since, gosh, I don't know when, 1970, 50, 40 or 50. And it's piles of dirt and piles of gravel and piles of asphalt and mosquito control, and they keep chickens there for mosquito control and all those other things. So us making any of these, and I know this is cleaning up paperwork that was left behind from when it was annexed. This was left out, but I just want to make sure from, I guess, the city attorney, that all of the activities that they do on the property now, all of those entitlements are maintained, so they can have chickens for mosquito control, they can have piles of dirt and asphalt, and we're not taking away any of their uses.
Mr. Manzarek?
That's not contained in this item that allows them to do that. So to the extent any of those type of uses are inconsistent with the city code, they would be subject to enforcement through the city. Those are not the kind of uses that are grandfathered in or entitled, in generally speaking.
Can we grandfather them in? My understanding is the city wrote a letter back when they annexed the other parcels, and Mr. Kujak might have the information.
You are absolutely right.
And the
did write
city promised
Yes.
that all those
They did.
entitlements were gonna be maintained. And I'm sure Mr. Kujak has said letter if he wants to come up.
Ms. Matheny, I know about the letter, I'm aware of the letter. The question you just asked me had to do with this property and the way it applies. If you want to ask me the question about whether I think that the letter is appropriate and consistent with the law, the answer to that question is no, I never thought it was.
So what do we need to do, or can we add something to the approval of these two items that says that they're allowed, as long as it's a road and bridge facility, that they're allowed to operate it consistent with what they've done for the last, I don't know, 80 years or whatever? Or is that?
You can certainly add it, yes.
Yeah. Or is it better suited as an industrial use, because that's what it is?
I don't know why these uses were selected.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson might be able to say.
Why isn't it?
Why are they public and professional?
Because we designate public properties as public. That's just the way we've always done it. We do it after the fact when it's, in this instance, it was annexed into the city, and we will be moving forward with some administrative rezonings of public properties to show them as public.
And
on our map.
professional?
Now, I was about to walk over to staff to get some clarification, because this was a PUD, so I'm presuming that the PUD has provisions in it, so I'm a little kind of on the fence now, because it seems like we could have the PUD had identify what your concerns are. So I was going to check with staff to see why.
We certainly, this is again another first reading in transmittal, correct? So we could, if you want to express that as part of your concern, we can work on that issue and see if we can figure out a better way to get it.
Well, I want to ask my other council members, do I have two others? Like, I want to make sure we're not hamstringing the county from being able to use the property for road and bridge maintenance consistent with what they've done for the last 80 years.
I'm good with that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it can be used as road and bridge until they want to redevelop it or move it. It might make sense moving down the road, but it needs to have a use consistent with that, or PUD that says specifically
Right.
these uses are allowed, but public doesn't have, those type of uses on it.
And well, I guess we need some understanding of what uses are out there and what uses the council doesn't have a problem with continuing to do it. It was clearly intent of staff, as I understand it, to allow the general principal purpose of the property to continue to be used the way it has. But we talked about chickens and other things that currently may be in violation of the city code, which may or may not be consistent with the principal use of the property.
But
Well,
if
they have
code
a mosquito.
enforcement,
They have a mosquito control building, and part of mosquito control is to have chickens to check for mosquitoes.
but like, if code enforcement looks at the zoning map, looks at this, and
Right.
they have to start
That's
enforcing
what I
the
mean.
code.
You're saying we can put enforcement on them. I don't want them to have enforcement for. I'm not trying to monkey up the process. I just don't want to unintentionally create a situation.
Are you part of this applicant? Are you the applicant? I'm sorry, I should have allowed you to speak earlier. I apologize. State your name and address for the record.
Walter Krujek, 6174 Oak Shore Drive. St. Cloud, Florida. So, you know, we bought this property back in 2006, 2007. Back then, at the time, you know, we continued doing what we always did. We stored stuff there, we did things there, and we have been doing that for a long time. So what happened was, it annexed into the city. It was part of this donut hole agreement that came in with the city. I did see the document, I don't have it with me, that said we can continue doing what we've always done there. But if we were to do something new, we'd have to come to the city. So what brought this to light was we wanted to build a new mosquito control building. So we went to the pre-DRC meeting, and that's when we were told that property zone PUD, it's got a medium density residential zoning district for it, and we couldn't do that. We'd have to do a comp plan amendment and a rezoning. You know, our understanding through the annexation was that we could continue doing what we do there. And I don't think we have chickens there anymore, but you know, we've stored stockpile materials there. We've parked our vehicles there. We've got stored culvert pipes there. We have been doing it. We've, unbeknownst to everybody else, didn't know that the property was actually zoned into the city. We never got a notice from the Code Enforcement Department. We never got an inspection from the Code Enforcement Department, from anybody from the city on that piece of property. The whole time we've owned it. So the only thing we're trying to do is make it right. Zoning designation is what the city had given. So when the property was annexed into the city, it came over as agriculturally zoned property. That's what we had it zoned as, was AC, the main portion. You know, the second portion, this portion, nobody ever discussed this portion with it. So the city did the rezoning and designated it with the P zoning. So what we were trying to do was just match it.
So on this
Councilmember
existing
Thune.
property right now, though, there is a mosquito control building, right? Doesn't this encompass the mosquito control building?
No, this mosquito control
It's on the
building
parcel to
sits
the,
right on the line.
on the line,
So we were gonna build a new mosquito control building that would have been over there.
right?
I
But
haven't-
I guess that was the thing, is like, there is a mosquito control on this complex. There is currently a mosquito control building, so it's not a new use. It's an existing use, and it sounds like the parcel to the north has the same zoning
It does have the same zone.
and future land use.
That's why we went with, was the recommendation we go with.
Right. We already have a consensus from the council to work with staff to work through all this.
So
Is that
should
not
the,
correct?
oh, sorry. So should the land use change to the public and then write a PD for that entire parcel to make sure all of that's protected?
I don't know what's the best
Because
mechanism.
the zoning looks like on all the other areas, they are, north is public institutional land use and professional zoning, so they'll all match now, but I think they all have that same issue of uses, historic uses that probably aren't allowed by the current zoning code. Might want to have the county attorney to.
I'm sorry. So I think, Mr. Anderson, we're not sure if that's the best way to address that. I really would recommend that if you want to move it forward and give us some time to work on it before it comes back before the city council and address it. We can work through some of these issues. The council's giving clear direction on how they want to handle it. But the best way to do it, I don't think, Mr. Anderson, and I can tell you that right now, but we certainly will figure out how to hammer it out.
Yeah, because my worry is that the property to the south of it, once the Nolte extension goes through it and maybe some residential goes around that or whatever, that new residents would complain about the use that's been there for 50 years. And then you look at code and go, well, we have to enforce based on what the current code says, right?
Well, and let me tell you that people do complain.
Yeah.
Road and Bridge has been there. It's kind of like our landfill. Like our landfill transfer station's been here forever, and then it develops all around it, and then everyone starts complaining about it, and it's like, you know,
I
kind
guess
of a situation. I would make a motion to continue it, well, not continue, to approve the first hearing, and then ask staff to figure out the best way to make sure all of the entitlements and rights and privileges that they've enjoyed for the last 80 years are maintained. Also, to look at the parcel to the north, if we need to make an adjustment, include the whole complex.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Matheny with the conditions that she stated, and a second from Councilmember.
And was that the land use, and we'll vote on them separate?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the land use you're approving.
We're voting on the first
It'll be the same
ordinance.
kind of
both-
motion
for
for
both of
both.
them.
It's the same kind of motion.
I just think
for
we have to
both.
vote on them separate, so that was 2106.
We're, I was going to state that. We're voting on ordinance number 2021-06. I have a second.
And that includes the
motion and a second.
transmittal, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we clear?
Who seconded it?
Mr. Cooper,
Chuck. All right.
Councilman Cooper. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to ordinance number 2021-07. Do I have a further discussion or motion regarding that?
I'll make a motion to approve the first public hearing with the same conditions as the previous one, to research what's the best way to do it and look at the whole complex, make sure that all their rights, entitlements, and uses that they've been enjoying are maintained.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Matheny, a second from Councilmember Cooper with the conditions that were stated. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 8, Madam Clerk.
Public hearing for resolution number 2021-034R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, amending resolution number 2020-215R, which adopted the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget for the City of St. Cloud, finding the city manager has certified there are prior year fund balances and/or current revenues available in the budget for additional projects and/or programs in various funds not included in the original 2020-2021 budget, requiring the budget to be increased to include said additional fundings and variations funds, making supplemental appropriations within the fund.
Ms. Colazo?
Good evening, Council. Winnie Colazo, Finance Director. In front of you, as you see, per code number 2-212, this is Budget Amendment 2 for fiscal year 2021. This is resolution number 2021-034R. This is an amendment to fiscal year 2020-2021. During the fiscal year, of course, the manager certifies that all available appropriations in excess of revenues are estimated in the budget. The City Council may, by resolution, make supplemental appropriations by the year. The city manager is certifying that these funds are available to appropriate the funds, and this budget amendment meets the city's strategic goal for the financial sustainability. First slide, in the general fund, $1,015,000 in increase. The increase to the revenues by $1,015,000 is an inter-fund transfer from the self-insurance workers' comp fund. It was determined that fund number 525 of the self-insurance workers' comp had an excess fund balance of $1,500,000 due to the average revenues of fiscal year 17-18 and fiscal year 19-20, which averaged $970,000 and an average expenditure of $320,000. We are increasing the expenditures in the general fund as well by $302,000 for the police department's salary and benefits. During the preparation of fiscal year 2021, in the budget, pay rates from the prior October 2019, where the cost of living increase were utilized, thus not providing the police department the most up-to-date rate, so we are correcting that. Also, in the general fund is an increase to the expenditures by $161,000 for the police department salaries and benefits. The city match portion of the COPS grant was budgeted for in expenditure, however, the full salary cost was not, so we are adjusting that. Increase in expenditures by $162,650 for the necessary items for the police department in order to increase public safety and the public officer training. These items included in the $162,650 include $49,000 for the Fuchsia's Core equipment to allow local businesses to participate in the citywide camera program. Along with that is $48,250 for a virtual reality training simulator. $50,000 for the citywide camera replacements, and $15,400 for the Bolo Wrap remote restraint devices to provide additional, less and less lethal options. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. Also in the general fund, we're increasing the expenditures by $13,200 for the fire department to replace the foam and damaged fire hoses used during the transfer station fire in January. We're increasing also the expenditures by $68,000 for the consultant of North Point to construct a city CIP program and to conduct the internal audit in finance as it has been presented before. Also,
Pardon me?
Yes, sir.
Are we going to get a portion of that money back for that, for the fire hoses and stuff like that?
Currently, sir, we've already received $100,000 from the
have.
insurance. Yes, sir. At this point, that's what we've received. It's an advance payment from the insurance. I don't know the full extent and what we will get repaired. I do not believe we're going to get anything for those hoses because that was just, they ran through some of the transfer station crud and also had some items stuck to them that provided
Don't come
them
out.
not used. Yep. So
Not cleanability. I think
that's right. So
They're contaminated.
Nassim, clean up your crud.
I would have said goo.
yes, sir. So I don't have the final numbers of the full reimbursement, but we have received in the coffers $100,000 in advance payment already.
Yeah, I had a question further down on the $525,000 for sanitation. That transfer,
Yes, sir.
we're getting a majority of that back in
Yes, sir.
insurance.
Yes, we received the $100,000 advance. The $525,000 we're moving from contingency to cover the cost while we get reimbursed.
Perfect.
Continuing on, was that all, Councilman Cooper? Yes, sir. In the general fund, we're increasing expenditures by $25,000 for additional grant writing services, increasing expenditures by $22,000 for the survey service for the cemetery plat for the East Narcoossee section, and then increasing council contingency expenditures by $562,848. That is all the changes for the utility tax, general fund. Moving to the utility tax, net increase is 0. We're increasing expenditures by $20,000 for the additional funding for the St. Cloud Cares Utility Assistance Program, $250,000 for the community support grant that was not initially included in fiscal year 2021, and then decreasing the contingency expenditures by $270 for the two affirmationed items that you see there, the $250,000 and the $20,000. Next fund is the St. Cloud Interlocal OUC fund, a net increase of 0, increasing expenditures by $350,000 for the interfund transfers for the estimated taxes for the Stevens Plantation, and then of course decreasing expenditures by $350,000, providing you the net 0 increase for the above reason. Next slide, please. In the Parks and Impact Fund, a total increase of $2,983,282. Inclusive in this is the increase of revenues of $2 million for the receipt of park impact fees for the Osceola County for Triangle, Triangle Park and Hickory Tree Community Park. We are also increasing revenues by $955,282 for the repayment of park impact fees for the police impact fee for the 2014 Stevens Plantation purchase. Next slide, please. Thank you. Increasing the expenditures by $28,000 also for site plan and permit for the police department trailer at the ranch at St. Cloud. And increasing contingency expenditures, a total to cover all this, $2,927,282 for the additional revenue less the above expenditures that we have listed. Next fund, in the police impact fee fund, we're increasing by $955,282. These are for the revenues received from the prior year fund balance, and we're increasing expenditures to pay the recreation back for the 2014 Stevens Plantation purchase. Also increasing the expenditures by $140,000 for the purchase of the police department mobile home for the ranch at St. Cloud to include mobile home, the fencing, and the decking. increasing the expenditures by $78,000 for the pre-design planning services for the proposed public safety complex, and then decreasing those contingency expenditures by $218 for the two listed above items. Moving on to the mobility fund, zero net increase. We are increasing expenditures by $2 million for the Nova Road settlement of the mobility fees with Osceola County. Therefore, we decrease contingency by $2 million for that item, so we can pay that.
I had that in my mind as 1.5 million from a couple months ago.
We did $2 million plus the next month of payments that were due because we're paying them on a monthly interval. We're still not done yet. The development has about 60 more units, and we're paying that on a monthly interval as we receive them. So that includes 1.5 plus the remainder that we had for that month to pay.
Oh, I thought 1.5 was the total.
No, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
Water fund increase is net zero, increasing the expenditures by $250 for a water conservation initiative, and then decreasing those expenditures by $250. In the sewer fund, we're increasing expenditures by $125. This is to cover the principal and interest payments for the 2013 sewer utility revenue notes that was undetermined. We didn't have those figures for the fiscal year 2021 budget process, so therefore now we have those numbers and are adjusting those to pay that principal and interest, therefore decreasing the contingency by $125. In the sanitation fund, we're increasing expenditures. This is your $525 for building and equipment due to the damages that happened January 16, 2021 for the transfer station fire. Therefore, we're decreasing contingency to cover this at $525 for the above item, and let it be noted the $525 clears all contingency available in the sanitation fund because of this incident. In the self-insurance workers' comp, we're increasing revenues by $1,500,000 from prior year fund balance. We're increasing those expenditures by $1.5 million to return the excess to all fund balances to the originating funds, and then increasing expenditures by $248,350 for medical care to offset the higher than expected cost for the fiscal year. This was the accident that we had for the police department worker that got hit. So the one-time fee just exceeded what we had. And then decreasing that contingency by $248,350 of the unexpected cost for the single item. Stevens Plantation, it's a total of $350,000 increase. We're increasing that revenue by $350 from an interfund transfer coming in from the OUC fund in order to pay for the DST taxes, which are due at the end of this month. This is staff recommending approval for Resolution 2021-034 and recommending action from council to approve such resolution as well. If you have any questions, let me know.
Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item?
Excuse me. Can I just clarify one thing? I think the presentation by Wendy pointed out that there was a transfer back to the Parks and Recreation Fund related about $900,000. That wasn't for the Stevens Plantation acquisition piece. I just want to make sure it's clear in the record. That's the 40+ acres that was bought through Parks and Rec and Public Savings. So that's not part of the Stevens Plantation project.
They're just paying it back.
Yeah, but again, I just wanted to make sure that we understood that's not part of Stevens Plantation.
Do you want it worded differently? Did we not word it correctly?
Yeah, it's in your presentation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now, discussion and or motion by council. Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Matheny, a second from Councilmember Trace for approval. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace.
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny.
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper.
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colazo. Brings us to council action. Item number 1, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2021-028R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, approving a water and wastewater service agreement for Martini Realty Fund, LLC, for a commercial development named Starbucks at Cobblestone, located in the unincorporated areas of Osceola County on the south side of U.S. Highway 192, north of Neptune Road, east of Parton Settlement Road, and west of Pecan Street, authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement and providing an effective date.
Ms. Craig.
Good evening, Marjorie Craig, Environmental Utilities Director. So this is outside the city limits, and you can see that the area in brown is the edge of the city limits, and the area in blue is the Starbucks under discussion for a water and wastewater agreement for service. Next slide. And this is a close-up of the location. So we recommend approval of the agreement. Water and wastewater capacity are available. And since it's outside the city limits, we must bring it before the city council for approval.
Thank you. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, we'll have discussion and a motion by council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Askew. And who gave me the second?
Matheny.
Matheny. Thank you. Councilmember Matheny has a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Trace,
I personally like Dunkin' Donuts, but approve, yes.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Madam Clerk, you'll read item number 2.
Resolution number 2021-038R, a resolution of the City Council, City of St. Cloud, Florida, approving a water and wastewater service agreement for North Star Narcoossee LLC for a commercial development named Narcoussee Daycare, located in the unincorporated areas of Osceola County on the west side of Narcoossee Road, east of Ottawa Drive, north of Jones Road, and south of Tuscarora Avenue, authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement and providing an effective date.
Marjorie Craig again, Environmental Utilities. This is another request to approve a water and wastewater agreement outside the city limits. It's for daycare. The little blue square is the daycare, and the edge of the service area, of the city limits is in the brown. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up of the daycare area. Next slide. And capacity is available. We recommend approval.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, we'll have discussion and a motion by council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Askew, second from Councilmember Matheny. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 3.
Resolution number 2021-047R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, authorizing the grant application by the St. Cloud Parks and Recreation Department under the Recreation Trails Program for the purpose of development and construction of a trails extension from Lakefront Park to Chisholm Park, and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement and providing an effective date.
Good evening again, Wendy Galazzo, Finance Director. This item was requested and presented by the city manager in the last meeting, and this is for the application request to apply for the Recreation Trails Program grant. The federal contribution for this grant is $400,000 with a city contribution of $600,000. In the background, and let me give you the status for it. This is in purpose for recreational trails, the trailheads, and trailside facilities, and it would help to assist to fund the construction of this trail extension from Lakefront Park to Chisholm Park. Next slide. We gave you a funding analysis to ensure the coverage of the $1 million in TIL reimbursement. Our funding strategy would be to take project number PR 1906, which is the trail extension Lake Chisholm, which has a balance of $648,453. And then the remaining funding will come from mobility impact fees, with $351,548 being called on that fund to cover the $1 million. To further give you some information, the Recreation Impact Fee Fund right now in the coffers holds $3,946,883. And the Mobility Fee Fund holds $17,087,470. With that, we have in the Recreation Fund $1,026,231 of called projects that are funded in the current year, minus the $648,000 that we're requesting, still leaves a fund balance after all said and done of $2,271,399. In the Mobility Fee Fund, currently in fiscal year 21, we have $959,992 projects funded for the fiscal year and committed. With the call of $351,548, it will still leave a balance of $15,775,931 while we apply and look for award of this grant. Staff recommends approval of action number 2021-047R. and ask council action to approve this resolution. Any questions, please?
Once again, would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, we'll have discussion and/or motion by council. Councilmember Thiene.
First of all, heck yeah, I support a grant application. But can you go back one slide, please? I guess there's always additional slides when we come to agenda review that are not in the packet, which would be nice to get them because then I see things sometimes differently when I see the additional slides. But I guess I'm kind of wondering why we don't take the entire balance from the mobility fee fund. And then my second question is, don't we have a $2 million item coming out of the mobility fee fund for the interlocal agreement for the PD&E forthcoming, or is that not coming out of mobility?
Yes, we do have that coming with that
So then
agreement with the
that's,
county.
because that's not shown in this,
Well-
that we know that's coming up pretty soon in there. But I would personally like to see if we took it all from the mobility fee fund. I don't know how the rest of council member feels on that.
Councilmember Trace.
And the extra slides might be my fault because I asked for that detail of these mid-year changes to, or allocations of funds. Kind of throwing me for a loop because we have a snapshot at October 1st, and then mid-year we're adding and removing.
It's not you.
Yeah.
It's every application we have.
Yeah.
It's like there's,
So like this is good to have this
absolutely.
ledger of it. I agree with the moving the money out of the mobility fee fund for the trail connection because it is mainly mobility. That's a good idea. In the recreation impact fee fund section, was Hastings Ranch out of this year or was that of last year's budget? Because I thought we had funds from recreation impact fees that went for the purchase of that.
That was this year's fund that has already cleared and paid because we expended that.
Okay, so the ledger you sent was just of upcoming projects, not the full fiscal year of projects that.
This is full fiscal year of committed projects. The ones listed here are not completed as far as being expended, but this is what we've committed for the year. So for example, like your Hopkins Bath has 200,000 in there that we've committed, but no expenditures have been, but we expect to do that. So the Hastings or Ranch at St. Cloud has been paid and done and cleared, so therefore it's not pending to be paid. We've already taken that out of the balances.
Okay, because it's just confusing the way this is laid out, but Deputy Mayor, or Councilwoman Matheny had a good point of just possibly moving all this out of mobility fee fund, and then it'll make it easier if we get the grant approved, that it just all comes back to that fund, instead of having to try to figure out the split. But I personally like this idea.
Yeah.
Councilmember Askew.
Thank you, Mayor. This really has nothing to do with any of this, I guess. Transportation impact fees, do we still have any of those still out there, or have we expelled all that?
No, we still have some in.
Couldn't we use it in this case, to try to get rid of it?
Mm-mm.
You can't now for that?
No, that's
not
why you
increasing.
went to the mobility fee concept, so that you can have a little bit more flexibility. in
Well, I
using those
figured it
funds.
was increasing capacity of some weirdness, so I was trying to get rid of that stuff. so.
To jump onto that, though, could that Nova Road settlement agreement be paid for out of transportation impact fee fund?
What Nova Road settlement agreement?
The $2 million, that the transfer that just happened, we had a presentation on a couple months ago, and that's what I thought it was 1.5 million. But it was, I think the city annexed a piece of property off Nova Road, and there was a settlement agreement between the county and the city of how to divvy up the impact. That.
Well, let me tag into this even more. So I
Not
had
a part of any of this.
No,
but-
this is all, now we're just having a workshop. So I had asked when this agenda item came up, because I know mobility fees are more flexible than transportation impact fees. So then I had asked what we were using to fund the PD&E that's gonna be coming to us in the next meeting.
It should be next meeting.
In the next meeting, when they were using mobility fee, and I said, well, why wouldn't you use the balance of the transportation impact fee, get rid of that fund? And then, because you can use that and that's less flexible. So I would like us to see, get rid of the transportation impact fee funds. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
And if I could, and Jeff was sitting in for you that day, he did explain you had a strategy to spend that down.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to expound on that, but Jeff did explain that, and I don't know if you had a conversation with him, but he did.
Well, that money is gonna either come out of mobility fee or
Correct.
transportation impact. So if we use it on the PD&E and close it out, I just feel like that would simplify life.
We could, the strategy right now, just because of, with auditors and speaking to them, is we're making adjusting journal entries right now during the audit in order to transfer over the transportation and clear that out because we had some adjustments to make, put it all back into the mobility because we can do that, and then finally close it out this year. So that's the plan. So
Okay.
we don't have that, you know,
Yeah.
loopiness, so.
So there is a plan.
And then PR 1906, just so you knew the strategy behind it was because there was some facilities within the trails that kind of mobility kind of got wishy-washy. So we were okay with mobility, but because it had that trail facility side of it, that's what the director, you know, wanted to. So, I mean, we're okay with it, but, you know, we got a little bit of gray, so we didn't want to be in gray. So we thought, you know, they had that funding there, but we can do it if you want to. We'll make those changes. Your call.
Yes, Mayor, I agree with Councilmember Matheny and Deputy Mayor. I just need another person of consensus to use the mobility
problem.
fees. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and so I guess the total cost of the project is $1 million, and how much of that is the recreational elements that will need to be paid for elsewhere?
From my understanding, it's going to be the contribution we're doing is going to be 400,000. The federal side is the trail side is the 400,000. So that's why they were keeping it at 351 to cover that. That's what they were officially were deeming was going to be the trail portion of it. But again, we have flexibility for that. So that was just a strategy to present to you all. We have flexibility to go 100% if you
Well,
want.
and that's what I want to make sure we don't get denied on the application because we try to do.
They're not going to care where your money comes from.
Okay.
No.
All right, good.
Sounds good.
Motion?
So do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Matheny, a second from Councilmember Askew. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace?
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Item number 4.
Discussion and possible action regarding Auditor Selection Committee.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, every 3 years, we're required by charter to have a new auditing company. For obvious reasons, the city manager nor the finance director can be on that selection committee. The state statute requires that we have a committee of at least one elected official and 2 members of the community that do the scope of work, and the procurement director would lead them through that process. And I've spoken to the mayor and requested that he serve on that without objection from the council. And Mr. Dave Reinhardt, who is also chairman of the Citizens Finance Committee, and Mr. David Meisner have agreed to serve, if there's no objections from the council, to serve on that committee to select the new auditing company.
Sounds good to me.
First of all, would anyone in the audience like to speak to that? If not, do we have a consensus from the council, or we need to vote on this?
Yes. Yes, please.
Do we need to vote on it? Do we have any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion from Councilmember Cooper.
With the recommended slate of individuals, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Second.
And second from Councilmember Trace. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll for item number 4?
Deputy Mayor Trace?
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny?
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Item number 5.
Discussion and possible action regarding pay adjustment for city employees.
Thank you, Mayor. If you recall, back in the budget hearings, I recommended to withhold any kind of increases for our employees due to the uncertainty of the pandemic we were facing. We've done a really good job this year monitoring our budget performance, and we think our budget is in a strong position to recommend that our employees receive a 3% pay adjustment. I just want to say, as a city manager, I really am proud of our team the last year. Today's the anniversary of the national emergency and the pandemic. They've stepped up to the plate. They've done without. We did keep everybody employed, but they have stepped up to the plate and really made this city shine during this emergency, and I recommend a 3% adjustment for our employees. Additionally, if you recall back during my evaluation, I was offered a 3% merit, and I declined that based on our other employees not receiving that increase, but I'd asked for reconsideration. But I can't take credit for this team. It's them. All I do is provide vision and sign a lot of stuff, but they're the ones that do the hard work every day. So I'd request that they would be allowed a 3% increase in pay.
Thank you. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, I would certainly like to make a motion that we approve the 3% and we include the city manager in that approval.
Second.
We have a second from two people. Motion from the mayor.
Trace.
And a second from Matheny. And Trace, and Askew. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for all you guys do. Item number 6.
Discussion and possible action regarding appointments to a vacancy on the Finance Committee.
The
Mr.
Finance
Trace?
Committee,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, yes, there's a vacancy on the Finance Committee. That is Deputy Mayor Trace's appointment.
All right, and it's my understanding that Ms. Coleman is actually trying to move out of town, so in an effort to try to keep consistency on the board, I'd like to make a motion for Mr. Terry Lloyd to be on the Finance Committee in seat 5.
We have a motion for the appointment of Mr. Terrence Lloyd. Are there any other discussion here? Then I'll make a second to that. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Manzares.
I do have a couple items, one specific item I'd like to go over with you. As you know, we're in the heart of legislative session. I provided you a memo earlier this week, and I apologize for providing it late, but this is some of the fast-moving stuff that's going on. There are essentially 5 bills that are pending that we believe have a potential significant impact on the city, and we would like to ask for the City Council to authorize the mayor to send letters to the governor, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and then to the Osceola County Legislative Delegation, essentially objecting to the bills. Again, I provided you a memo earlier on this. Essentially, the bills, and I'll just run through them real quick. The first bill that we see as an issue for the city is House Bill 55 and Senate Bill 284, which is entitled Building Design. Essentially, this is a bill that would prohibit or preempt the city from adopting what is commonly referred to as architectural standards and design for residential properties, single and two-family homes. Obviously, this is something the city of St. Cloud has been working on for a while, and this bill would essentially restrict the ability to deal with some of the external features that you've talked about over the years. So we would essentially ask or prepare a letter for the mayor to send to the legislature and the governor to basically object to that, as it is essentially is a preemption bill and keeping the city from addressing an issue it won't. The second item is Senate Bill 60, House Bill 883, which is with regard to code enforcement. This is an interesting bill that is being brought through the legislature, which would provide that the city could not pursue a code enforcement action based on an anonymous complaint. And it would actually require that any complaint that the code enforcement department investigates or follows up on could only be done when a citizen provides their name and address. We think there's a lot of problems with that. We also think it's unnecessary. The code enforcement process has provisions that essentially where a potential violation cannot be presented to the special magistrate unless the presenter or the witness has actually personally observed the violation. So what typically happens when the city finds out about a violation, whether it comes from a citizen, whether it comes from self-observation, whether it comes from the city manager's office or anywhere else, is the code enforcement officer goes out there and visually, personally inspects it. So how the complaint is generated is not necessarily germane or relevant to the proceeding, because at the special magistrate meeting, a code enforcement officer will have verified independently whether a violation exists. If a citizen provides an anonymous complaint and the code enforcement officer goes out there and finds that there is no violation, the matter doesn't pursue it. So we really don't think this is needed. We also think that it could potentially have a consequence of essentially pitting neighbor against neighbor, which would not be an intent. And at the end of the day, I think it would impact the ability of the city to pursue violations. So again, we're asking for a letter to objection to that. The next item I want to briefly go over is what's referred to as the home-based businesses bill, which is quickly moving through the legislature, and it's gone through, I think, pretty much most committees already. And essentially, this is a bill that would preempt the city from regulating home-based businesses. We believe that this bill came out of the fact that people were working remotely, and so the more people are working from home. However, the bill does not restrict what type of businesses can operate in a residential area, and it also goes further to allow for a certain number of employees could actually work out of a residence. So we think it's problematic. We think it's a preemption where the city couldn't regulate it. Right now, essentially, home-based businesses operate in the city, simply, to put it simply, without where basically the neighborhood doesn't know they exist. So if someone has an office use and they work out of they work out of a second bedroom in their house, but they don't see customers, they don't have signage, they don't store products on there, and so that it's consistent with the neighborhood. They're not bothering their neighbors. We're concerned that this bill would allow for expansion of uses, and essentially people could have some fairly intensive uses operating within their subdivision or in their residence. Within their residential neighborhood. So we again would ask that the council would authorize the mayor to send a letter objecting to this bill. My iPad just slowed down. The next one is there's a bill pending there's a large comprehensive bill pending with regard to impact fees. This happens fairly regularly. They deal with the presumption associated with how impact fees are supported and the studies that have to be done. The problem with Bill 337, and 750, Senate Bill 750, is that it puts an artificial cap of 3% on the annual increase of impact fees. We don't, again, like with the code enforcement issue, we do not think this is necessary. As you all know, if having sat through the meetings or sat through the issues where impact fees or mobility fees are created, they are based on experts, mobility and impact fee studies that are based on the immediate needs and the established levels of service for the community itself, which can fluctuate depending on growth, depending on population increases, and depending on, frankly, the level of service that a community wants to set for itself. So to put an artificial cap on it, we think is inappropriate and could limit a future thing. The City of St. Cloud, thankfully, has done a good job keeping up with its impact fees. We don't think it's going to be an issue, but it could be something down the road that if there was an unexpected increase in population base or level of service started to suffer, and you had to go above that 3% to make new development pay for itself, the cap would prohibit you from doing that. So we would ask that the mayor be authorized to send a letter objecting to that preemption also. The final one has to do with vacation and short-term rentals, and this is a preemption that it started out as a complete preemption where the state would come in and said that would prohibit the local governments from regulating these uses, and as you know, this has been a long-standing issue for over the last several years. The legislature's last action with regard to this was basically to prohibit a city from banning short-term and vacation rentals. This bill, the proposed bill right now, goes further to say the city cannot restrict them as to any more than they would any other residential property. So you couldn't put special parking requirements on them, couldn't deal specifically with the number of occupants that might be in a premise on a premises, couldn't deal with certain things like how the outside activities are, so that you could prohibit a residential property basically being used as a, you know, a hotel resort in the middle of a neighborhood. Thankfully, yesterday, an amendment was presented out of the Senate to this bill that would take out the preemption of the bill and would remove the piece where where a local city couldn't pass additional restrictions on these uses. What the amendment was provided to address that piece, but the bill also has some very good pieces in it. Like the bill has some language in there that would regulate the advertising platforms that use these, require them to pay the taxes that these rentals are, vacation rentals are the resort taxes that they're supposed to pay. So there's some good portions to that bill. So the letter we would suggest that the mayor send would be to object to the piece that deals with the preempting the city from providing restrictions on these uses, and essentially support the piece that allows for the oversight related to advertising, the platforms that are used to book these, and the collection of the taxes, which we obviously has a lot of. The tax issue has an impact on the city and the county. The advertising and the regulation on the platforms that advertise these places is a consumer protection issue, which I think is important. So those are the 5 bills. We would suggest that if it's okay with the council, and authorize the mayor to do that, to send the letters of objection again to the governor, the speaker of the house, the president, and the Osceola County legislative delegation.
If we approve that, do we just need a motion or just a consensus from the council?
Just a consensus and direction from the council.
Can we send those to Florida League of Cities too, to add to their pile that they?
Yes, and we would
sent
do
out?
that also once it was signed, and we would do it. They've been asking about some of the bills, and they were asking for governments that are doing this to provide them notice of information of them.
Well, I know the Tri-County League of Mayors are certainly opposed to all of these preemptions that attack the issue of home rule, and I know that they're certainly supportive of that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think we're going to be doing this every year now, this type of activity. We'll try to do it sooner, but it moves pretty quick once you get to that point. Thank you.
Councilmember Athene, you were wanting to speak.
It's just a thumbs up. I'm for it.
Is there any opposition from the council for us sending our objections? And then especially on number 5, the way that our city manager has recommended, I certainly support it 100%. I believe there are no objections, and so we're unanimous in our support.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
That's very important. Thank you very much. Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, and I think you all are already aware that our Outlook email server's down. They're working on it diligently. It's been down for about 36 hours. They should be back up tonight, hopefully.
It's up now, because I just got like
Oh,
47.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to check before I said that. Well, thank you, Mr. Trace. The other thing I wanted to share with you, because of that outage, we got the report from Raftillus for police, fire, and Parks and Rec impact fees. Staff did not have a chance to review that and make any technical corrections. So I will be postponing that to the April workshop. However, the workshop for the 18th of this month will be covering the major corridor overlay. We'll be talking about that, and that's the only item we'll have on that. And lastly, I've struggled with this, moving out of this building back to City Hall on the dais, the regular dais. But I kind of joked to Councilmember Matheny, I don't know if I can stand somebody walk across this floor anymore. So I really need you guys' direction. If you want to move back there, we'll have to make some adjustments. In other words, staff can't be in the room. We'll have to make some adjustments. We had a plan previously. We'll reenact that plan, but I just need a consensus to do that.
Would this council like to speak to that item?
I'm ready to move. Go back to City Hall.
I would like to go back to City Hall. I just think the meetings are live, like, that's where everybody expects us. And the city manager today told me that it's about the same number of seats here that we could accommodate there. I mean, you know, they're just further away, and I would like to move back to the building.
Any objections?
I'm good with it as long as we can keep everyone safe. And then we can set up love seats, like people moving together to where you can actually fit more when couples come. They can sit together so they don't take up 2. big old sections.
I think you
Yeah, I love
certainly have
seats,
a
right?
consensus to move
There
back to
was
City
a
Hall.
couple
Okay, we're good.
earlier.
We've got 2 weeks to figure it out, so. So the workshop will be back at the regular, at City Hall.
I think you just facilitated according to
Okay.
what you feel is best to accommodate the move.
Yes, sir.
However how much time you need.
And finally, I'm going to be off until next Wednesday, and Ms. Miller is also out of town. I'm actually in the state. Mr. Anderson will be the acting city manager.
Oh, my goodness.
I,
Do we need to pray?
Changes.
We need to
Andre,
pray.
good luck.
He's going to be changing
Call me
stuff.
if you need me. All right, thank you.
Well,
That's
we
all I
look
have,
forward
Mayor.
to-
Put Andre on speed dial. Andre, you're going to be on speed dial.
You have anything else, Mr. Sturgeon?
No, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. I guess the first thing I want to say, somebody else is probably going to say it, but we have a parade this Saturday, Paint the Cloud Green. It's our first annual parade. I don't know how many floats we're going to have. Did you find out?
No, I did not.
But it's the same parade route, it appears, as the Christmas parade, and it starts at 10. So if you be curious to see how this turns out, it's like our first time doing this parade.
What do you want to wear?
What?
What do you want to wear?
I guess I'm going to wear the shirt we got. So I would ask the city manager if you could send an email to all of council updating us on timeline schedule on the impact fees, because we've been asking to, revisit those. You guys were doing an analysis on.
Right, and so,
So you don't have to do it now, just get together with staff and put together like kind of a timeline of where we're at with it, unless you know that right now.
well, again, we have the police and fire and we have police, fire, and public works completed. We have another meeting with the consultant Monday for mobility fees. And so in the next several months, we'll be addressing this. So we were going to talk about it on the 18th, the police, fire, and Parks and Rec impact fees. And then the mobility fees follow that. And then,
But like adoption, like when do you?
Oh,
envision it
okay,
come-
you
You
want
know,
the-
like I want to get like the whole
Right.
soup to nuts, like when we think we're gonna be
okay. we'll
having
put-
this in place, and then there's like usually like a 90-day or 6-month
It's 90 days, yes, ma'am. Well, I get what
warm
you're
up,
saying.
and I want to know like kind of a timeline for that to be, and also the architectural standards. We've kind of talked about that this week, but just a timeline of when those will be coming back to us for adoption.
We
on
can
those.
do that.
And the last thing I wanted to ask and see what the other council members feel about this. I know that our city budget has done better than we thought was going to happen back when we were going through our budgeting process. And I know that our St. Cloud Food Pantry is struggling with the amount of people that need assistance right now. So I would like if we could find $10,000 to $15,000 to cut a check to the St. Cloud Food Pantry again. I don't know if that comes out of council contingency.
We actually have CDBG money, and I'll have Mr. Anderson. Is that why you were? Did I misspeak? They were talking about additional funding for the food pantry, and we have CDBG money available that we got from the federal government. So,
Yes, we've been working, trying to, one, find a new location for them, so we can use CDBG money for that purpose. We did find a location, but it fell through because of one of the requirements for that location. They can't have non-retail establishments in that retail center. So because they have very specific criteria, has been a bus line and other things like that. So we've been hunting around trying to find a suitable location for them. But as far as funding, we also have funding as well, and we can allocate money. We have a bit of funds that we've already planned to allocate to the food pantry.
So we have the money right now?
Yes, we have
You could write a check?
we have a line of credit with HUD, yes.
So how much were you planning on allocating?
Well, I didn't clear with the city manager.
what would you like? How much? It was at 50.
50,000.
50,000? Even better. Even better. So I'd support that.
Are there any other issues where that money definitely is needed beyond the food? I know the food pantries are great need.
We have also been identifying other needs. We identified some closing cost assistance money as well. I have a waiting list right now of folks wanting funding assistance, so we are putting that together. We just launched the business rental assistance funding. That's also through CDBG. We also launched the outdoor furniture grant program, also through CDBG. We are about to start the Habitat for Humanity weatherization and housing rehab as well. So we are starting to move forward with all these programs.
Well, I'm a little concerned about,
I think
certainly, that's a great need, but given the whole 50,000, when you're trying already to move forward with other needs, I think we might need to reconsider that.
I'd say 10 or 15,000.
I was gonna say 20,000, and then you got the 30,000 to work with, and if we need to come back.
20,000, that's even better. I was saying 10 to 15, so 20 is great if we could. And is that something we could do quickly?
Yes.
3
We're gonna
for
put
20?
Problem?
We're going to put
We
it
got 3
as,
for 20.
We're good.
got it.
20, are we, we're in support of that.
Okay, we'll move forward.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, very helpful.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. Mr. Sturgeon, can you give me a little bit of update on the, haven't asked you, update for the fencing at the band shell and the cemetery, both of them. If you haven't been by there lately and looked at them, they look sorry. I mean, if the city does this and you let the citizens do this, this is bad. They need to be repainted. I mean, they're just half painted and the rest of them's rusted. Hadn't been painted forever.
Okay, I'll have staff look at it. The cemetery.
How quickly can you do it?
I'll have Ms. Holtkamp send somebody out to look tomorrow.
Okay, because both of those, the cemetery's looking bad too. So if you could look both of them,
So cemetery and then Veterans Park.
Veterans Park, yeah.
All right, thank you.
It needs to be refurbished. It looks terrible. And you and I talked about, tell me again, the music.
I've got some great news.
You
Mr.
okay? I know
Cooper.
you are.
So we don't have to talk about this anymore. So
Just
they're
tell
actually
me,
out
when you
today
gonna be
doing the
there?
Wi-Fi test. We got approval to put the speakers on the poles. As I pointed out, because if we had a wind event, the OUC will take down the string light, so it brought us under the threshold. The second thing is they're ordering the equipment, and I was told by the project manager within 30 days we'll have music.
And you and I talked about the oak trees on New York Avenue. We've got one complaint that they're going to lose their insurance through Mr. Hodgins. Has called me and told me that he's going to lose his insurance because of the tree that's right there in front of him. It's going to keep growing, and they think it's going to fall into their tree, into their property, I guess. So you and I talked about that. Where are we at, or what?
I didn't take any action other than
I know
cleaning
you
up the
didn't, but-
leaves, and it's in the right of way. So my recommendation is we're gonna go down and look and see if we can trim those.
Can you trim them back?
I'll
They
have to
haven't
get
been
the-
trimmed at all.
I'll have to get the Parks and Rec and the arborist to look at it.
I mean,
I'll-
they trimmed underneath a little bit, but they haven't shaped them. They're gonna do that shaping a little bit more often?
I'll get them to go take a look. But like I said, we did clean up the leaves, month, 6 weeks out of the year.
Yes, I called you
There's-
about that, because the leaves were all over the place. You're gonna keep up with that on every 2 or 3 days?
Our crack
I mean-
solid waste team come up with a way to do it with a vacuum tractor, and they go down and vacuum the sidewalk.
That's not-
I've given direction. I call it Disney clean down there.
Disney clean every 2 or 3 days. Can you?
I don't know if we're gonna do every
Well,
Tuesday, but
take
once a week.
Take a
and then
drive
the-
through there, and when
the
it
street
gets bad,
sweeper-
get it vacuumed up.
The street sweeper goes through there once a week also.
As long as you can get it vacuumed up and cleaned up, don't have to be sitting out there in front of a pile of leaves in front of them. I appreciate that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Can I add something to Mr. Cooper's comments? It looks like, it could just be what it looks like, but it looks like the street sweeper sucks out the sand in between the pavers. So
It
just
does.
bear that in mind. Like when you stand out there, there is no sand in the area where the street sweeper goes. So I don't know how good of an idea that is to run the street sweeper up and down the road all the time.
If you look out there, if you start walking up there from 10th Street to 11th Street on the west side of New York Avenue, you'll see all kinds of leaves. I mean, just piles of them.
Right, I'm not debating the leaves, I'm just saying maybe vacuuming isn't the best
Well, that's on
mechanism.
the sidewalk. They're not,
We-
and like I
we-
said, we realized very quickly with the historic brick, we're gonna have to sand pretty, I don't know, regularly, because it does get washed away, sucked up by the street.
It's a maintenance job.
Yeah, yeah, it's a high-maintenance road.
It really is.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Deputy Mayor Trace.
I'm good, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, you're done. Councilmember Askew.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to bring back a little bit of the seaplane base, I had a chance to talk to Terry Lloyd, who's executive director for the airport in, former, but he's open to if the city's looking for ideas and things like that. I mean, why, he was wondering why we didn't reach out to him when we were just doing the seaplane base. I didn't even.
Never
dawn
thought
on
of
me,
it, honestly, but that's a great resource.
Right. So he's open to it.
He's
not
on
to
our
throw him
finance
under-
committee now.
Yeah, he is. He is. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you. I don't have anything new. Brings us to our information and report section, Saturday, March the 13th. It'll be Paint the Cloud Green Parade, which you've already heard referred to at 10 a.m. in downtown. Thursday, March the 18th, there'll be a city council workshop at 3 p.m. here in the community center. Thursday, March the 25th, there'll be a city council meeting somewhere at 6:30 p.m. We've issued a proclamation in recognition of Fix a Leak Week. I'd like to remind you all that the reports, the warrant list number 7, and the Recreation Advisory Committee minutes are available for October, and they have been approved. There are no other items on our agenda. With that, we will be adjourned. Thank you so much for your participation in our government.
Hey, Bill,